else, can I ask you something? Do you really like working on Kane stuff?
You really like busting people?
I bust frauds, I bust fogies. I love it.
Have you ever busted anyone you know?
Yeah, I do. That makes no difference. See, in my business, you soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. This doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. Believe me, the sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane. You really like busting people?
I bust frauds, I bust fogies. I love it. In my business, you soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. This doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. Believe me, the sooner we're off the planet, the better.
The sooner we're off the planet, the better. Yo, what's up, homeboy? What's going on? Tonight, everybody, we have a special treat. We've got our friend from Boiler Room, Grunt Smash, and he's here because he is the expert in what we're talking about tonight. And tonight, we will be analyzing, doing a deep analysis of the 2005 film Jarhead with Jake Gyllenhaal and a bunch of people, Jamie Foxx, who is in the news again I guess we'll get into that. It's directed by Sam Mendes. And Grunt, what's up? How you doing tonight?
Good, man. What's up with you? I'm glad that we're finally getting our chance to do this. I feel like we've been kind of dancing around it for a while, and it's been hard to get done, but I'm excited to do it, man. I think this is going to be a good time, and I'm excited to see what we can dig up, man, for sure.
Yeah, I think, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, that are going to watch this or in the chat right now have seen this movie because, for one, it's a dude's movie. It's about, a guy joins the Marines, goes off to Iraq sort of unexpectedly in the film. And that's part of what the film is about, his sort of journey through life, his rite of passage, his self-discovery. And it's this like group of misfits that are interesting and likable. And one thing I'll say right off the bat here is that this movie is relevant because when you go back and rewatch this sort of film, it's made in 2005 and it's about Desert Storm, in the first Iraq war. And we're now watching it in hindsight, sort of both of these things. And it's like this nexus point between, I think, like a nexus point between generations, between eras, the pre-Big Nine era, and then going into the war on terror, and now we sort of find ourselves in the Great Reset. But what do you think? You are a military man, and you have actual experience versus some of the LARPers that are here with me. Some of my friends, we like to LARP as US Marine Sam Hyde and the Ghost of Kiev, but you are an actual, you're the actual dude. So how do you want to get into this? Tell us about yourself.
I think I'll just kind of start by throwing out the the idea that this was like the very, very beginning of the war on terror, which you mentioned, but the guys that fought in this war were the people and the men and women, I should say, that created and made the path for guys like me, guys that come after me, and then the small part of the generation that came before me. These guys are people that I still look up to. The guys in that war were it was a different breed, man. Especially the last major war that happened before the Gulf War was the Vietnam War, where people, the idea was different. Not still during that war and the war we're still currently fighting. There's a little bit more support, I feel like, than there was for Vietnam. But I feel like it was an American switch. Like the American people kind of spun their idea around about war and all that other stuff. So the story, I think, in the beginning kind of shows a little bit about how, like you said, the misfits, I guess you could say, or the group of guys that, came from literally all walks of life. The first, couple lines in the story, I think, are very important, especially for today, talking about, you're not black, you're not green, you're not yellow, you're not purple, you're green. Like, we are all fighting the same war.
The only color that matters here is green. You are green. Yeah.
What's funny is they mention literally the first couple of lines in Full Metal Jacket were the same thing, right? Like there's a point to that. There's a reason that they said that, and that's something that's instilled in us in the military in the very, very beginning. Is nobody gives a shit. Like, nobody cares where you're from, any of that stuff. The only thing that matters is that you're all here for a common goal. And I think that was probably maybe a softer point to this movie, is we're all here. It's a common goal. Whether you joined for the money or you joined because you wanted to fight, whatever it was, it didn't matter. We all have the same goal. So let's go do it.
Right. So how does he get into the Marines, by the way? Do you remember what happens there? He because he's this is Jake Gyllenhaal playing the writer, Anthony Swofford, who wrote this chronicle, a sort of not really a memoir, but a chronicle of these events. And it's interesting because the narrative in the book begins, or in the film begins, pre-Desert Storm, pre-Iraq. Like you said, the last big thing was Vietnam. That's obviously like still on everyone's minds. Everything's compared to Vietnam. There was Grenada and, a couple other things. But by the way, a good movie about Grenada is Heartbreak Ridge. Have you seen that film, Clint Eastwood?
That one I haven't seen, no.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's mid-'80s. Again, a group of misfits, and then they find themselves in Grenada with Clint Eastwood. But yeah, this is interesting because it's kind of the same story as Chris Carl and his entryway into the Navy, like joining up, and then and 9/11 happens. But for this guy, it's like there's nothing going on. He's got no prospects, and the other guys are going to say that also, and they join up, and then this war starts, like kind of out of nowhere. And you weren't alive when this happened, were you? You weren't born yet.
Man, I have to do math. Yeah, no, I guess not. Good Lord. I did, however, search real quick because I wasn't 100% sure, but yeah, it was similar to Chris Kyle's reasoning for joining, but basically he didn't have anything else better to do. Right. Like the original, the actual person, Swofford. Yeah, he's terrified of becoming a failure in a normal life. Swofford wanted to join the Marines from an early age, saw it as an entry into manhood. And that's something like, my grandfather was a Marine for 29 years. And he was, that guy was my idol, right? So I knew I wanted to do something. I'm sure that he's mad I didn't join the Marine Corps, but, he'll get over it. I guess he's dead now. So I guess he probably doesn't really care. But I think that's the reason that most people do it. Outside of like a draft or something like that, you don't just, a lot of people don't just up and decide, hey, I want to go fight. I want to go to war. That's what I want my whole life. It's because they want to pay for college, or they want to get out of their parents' house, or, whatever it is. I definitely just wanted to get out of my parents' house. Like, yes, I was going to join the military, but the way I did it, how fast I did it, choosing infantry the way that I did, it was the fastest way to get the hell out. So
Right.
I can jump on his thing there.
You joined the Army, right? You were in the Army?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Right. So, yeah,
A little bit different, but
what seems to be a common, story that you hear, that you wanted to get out of town or, life sucks or just a number of reasons. My question is, did they like make promises to you about things that, would happen or that you could do, when you joined, and what was the reality of that?
So they recruiters definitely have, I don't think a quota is the right word, but I guess it's probably the best way to explain it. So if we're in a time of war and they want people to join, the old Uncle Sam poster, the Army wants you, right?
Right.
It's because we need to beef up the front lines, right? The only thing that I was really promised, I didn't get a bonus. I didn't get like a special job, although I could have. I just didn't care to, I guess. The biggest thing that they told me is they said, hey, after basic training, after you go through all your stuff, you're going to end up, it's just going to be a regular 9-to-5 job. Like, it's not a big deal. You'll come in the morning, you'll, do a formation, hang out and talk, and then you go home at 5 o'clock. And I was like, in my head, I knew that something was off, right? Like, no way am I going to go. They're going to teach me to kill people, right? That's essentially what my job was. They're not going to teach me to do that from 9 to 5. Like, there's got to be more to it. But all the things that, and I'm not talking bad about the military, not talking bad about recruiters, but the things that they tell you can do, you are absolutely able to do them. Now, will you get the opportunity to? Maybe not. Like you can go. I've been to, I don't know how many classes and certificates and stuff I've trained on and things, but you could absolutely go to the military for college. You can go to the military, to learn how to do stuff. I mean, there's so much that you can learn, that you can get from the military. It's just, are you able to? Because it's all based on the needs, right? So if we're in a time of war and they need aircraft mechanics, they'll throw $10,000 bonuses out there, or we need, whatever it is, they'll kind of jump on that and do that. So were there things they promised? Yeah. Did I necessarily get the positive or the negative of that? Not really. I knew it wasn't a 9 to 5. I'd been around the military enough to know. But that was like the big thing that the recruiter tried to sell me on. Like, it's just a regular job, dude. Don't stress it. And it's not at all a regular job.
Yeah. One of my friends went to the recruiter, kind of in a, he felt like he had nothing going on, so he went to the recruiter, and his cousin had been in the Navy, and various members of his family had served, and he came back and he told me that he said that he went to the Navy office and they promised him a cushy job right away looking after the nuclear reactors. In Chicago, he lived in Chicago lifestyle. He'd be able to go to the clubs. It was just like you said, like a regular 9 to 5. He could pretty much write his own schedule. He'd be making $100K like within a year. And I was like, I know that they stretch it because they're recruiting, but like none of those things are going to happen. Right.
No.
And I really had to, I was like, but if you want to do it, and he ended up not joining, not because of me, but, not signing up. But his cousin actually was in the Navy and was stationed like somewhere in the middle of the country, landlocked, which was odd. But I've heard, I've had various friends who were in, the Marines, the Navy. My uncle was a Marine officer in Vietnam, and I guess I shouldn't talk about him too much, but his experience there completely differs from what everyone, perceives as the Vietnam vet. He saw it as an opportunity like for honor, and he took it very seriously. And he said it, it was the greatest experience of his life. And that's saying something because he was in combat. But this movie kind of shows that time has passed. There's even a scene at the end of the movie which will illustrate that. But that time has passed. And when you got into the Army, what did you feel like was the general sort of, not the feeling, but what was the I don't know, what did people think about the military? And especially when you first got in, what were their thoughts? What was their opinion of the United States, of the war, of all that stuff? I know it's a big question.
No, I mean it was definitely more based around the environment that you were in, right? So if you go to and this is just my personal experience. My family was obviously super proud to kind of take on the tradition because my dad didn't, none of my uncles did. I don't think so. So I was like the next generation, the next person to join the military and take that route in life. So obviously my family was super proud. My friends were super proud, but the city that I had left, more by what we call our home of record, which is wherever we leave from to join, it's not a military town. So they were like, "Oh, that's super cool. Like this is really great," all that kind of stuff. And then we ended up, I got to Georgia, and they just fly you into, I don't think it's Atlanta. I don't remember the name of the airport. And the people there, they're just so used to it because they see 150,000 soldiers a year coming through. So they kind of they weren't mad at us. They weren't like disgusted with us, but you could tell like they looked at you and you just had that look. They're like, "Good luck, sucker," like there wasn't a lot of support from those people.
Okay.
But that's probably because they see so many of us. I'm sure that, we all come from different walks of life, right? Like where I grew up is different from,
California, man. You think you're going to be in the military down here in Savannah? It's going to be as sticky as molasses. You're going to see.
Oh man, it really was too. But I mean, everyone just comes from a different walk of life. We all come from different places. And so when we all kind of get together, all of us are terrified. There's always that one or two that are like, can't be that bad, right? And the rest of us are like, oh shit. Like, what did we just get ourselves into? So depending on where you come from and who you talk to, I think really, really changes it. I think at that point in time, as far as like the country goes, at least what I felt about it, dude, we had been in this war so friggin' long. I think that people just stopped giving a shit. Like, let's be honest, right? Like Desert Storm, Desert Shield, all that stuff happened in the early 90s, late 80s, somewhere in there. I mean, I don't know what the technical dates are. And then, I joined in, oh good Lord, 2010. So considerably later. And it was the same, it wasn't the same campaign, but it was the same war. And so I think that kind of America just become desensitized to it. They're like, oh, we're still fighting that, and in the beginning, I didn't care because I didn't do it because I wanted somebody to give me a high five. I mean, it's not the truth. That's not it. But then kind of later, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, especially with going over the movie, it started to actually kind of piss me off. Like America, I don't necessarily blame Americans, but we've been fighting this war for so long that people became desensitized to it. They didn't really care, to the point where there were soldiers dying daily over there in little chunks of time throughout the year. And it wasn't on the news. Nobody was talking about it. So I think honestly, America just becomes so desensitized to it that they just, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that it was 2010 for you. I mean, that really is the midpoint in the total war on terror. This is way past shock and awe, into Obama era. Past W, where the war kind of, from a totally a civilian, slightly autist perspective. It's like the Obama era became it was a totally different phase, right? This became the phase of winning the Nobel Peace Prize and then ramping up the Hellfire missiles on weddings and all that stuff. So it's say one thing, do another. And I just say that because, my own thoughts and opinions about the war in general, drastically shifted, over that period of time. When it started, when the Big Nine happened, I was living in the UK. I was in Northern Ireland, and I was in I was there and in England for like the bulk of that first, invasion. And they would have these huge rallies in London, against W and all this stuff. And at the time, that drove me into like this American, like hyper patriotism, because it was just me. There were no other Americans, and that's sort of what ends up happening. And I couldn't understand, I had like pictures of W. I had like a magnet on the fridge. I was like all about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like turn that desert into glass. And then over time, like you said, it was like, what are we doing? And there was a guy, he was the senator for Virginia, and he was in Nam, he was a Marine. He wrote a book called Fields of Fire. And what's that guy's name?
I don't know his name, but I've read the book.
Yeah, and he was interesting because, he was a Democrat, but he was and he'd been a Marine and all this stuff, and he was actually critical of the war. And of course, my first reaction was like, of course he's critical of the war, right? He hates America. But then, again, over time, it was like, okay, look, the logical, people are not spurging out about this war, and this is turning into something very bad. And, and now my viewpoint, my views are what they are. But I'd say that it's interesting that you joined in 2010, like right in the middle of that. I think that's so interesting, because there was still so much time to go,
Right.
and there's actually a line in the movie where, they're like, how long you think we'll be here? And he's like, 2 weeks. And I said to myself out loud when I was watching, I was like, 20 years, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I don't remember who, somebody put it out. I don't know if it was a quote or just, maybe it's just a fact I saw, but this is the only war, because technically the war started in the 80s, 90s, and it's still considered now the war on terror, that has been to where 2 separate generations both have fought in the same war. Right. Which I mean, logically is insane. I mean, just thinking about it is literally blows my mind. Like I don't know how to respond to that,
Yeah, it really is. Like when you watch footage or documentaries about Desert Shield and Desert Storm, the soldiers even look, the Marines, and they look different. They had mustaches and like, Oakleys, and they were it was very 90s. And you think about those guys like 30 years later, some of whom I'm sure were still there or went back, as they went up or were in special
Absolutely,
forces,
yeah.
and became these grizzled guys, and it's like, that's a great point. That puts us sort of on par with some of the other nations that have been at war for, decades, and we haven't experienced that. All of our wars have been, the thought is like the surgical strike, right? Even World War II, we got in 2 years late, right? World War I, 2 years late. So, I guess we had it coming in a way, or we made that happen. One thing somebody brought up the other day is, if these wars were about oil, which, I mean, the movie even shows us that, where's the oil now, and why are the gas prices what is the deal, dude?
So I'm not gonna say, because I mean, I don't know, right? Like I'm just a lonely, my nickname Grunt Smash, one of the two or both, whatever. That's why I nickname myself that. I literally have it tattooed on my arm. Like, I don't pretend to be some guy that knows all this shit about the oil and all this other, I don't, none of that's important to me, right? I joined because I wanted to do something bigger and better than myself. I did what I was told, and that was the end of it. But the whole oil argument, like, it honestly, it cracks me up, because we all, at least I think that we all kind of like, really, the oil, like that. That's not what we were fucking doing. But
Yeah.
in the movie, it tells them that, or it tells us that, because I don't know why they do it, but it's a good cover. It's a good smoke screen, if you will, because nobody was over there. Like, we weren't guarding fucking oil. That wasn't the whole point,
Yeah, Chris Cooper, was he a general? He says, and gentlemen, there is a lot of oil. A lot of oil.
It's just not like, there's you're kind of taught throughout basic training, your first duty station, getting ready to deploy, all those things. You're kind of taught like to not question anything, right? And I think, complete and total side note, that's what's making the military from the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, even, you know, into the 2000s. And then when I joined, were completely different because people were questioning shit. And there wasn't, you weren't allowed to stop people from questioning stuff. Right. And that's where we're, at least in my opinion, that's where the downfall of our military is now, is they're questioning things. Well, there wasn't, you know, I remember my grandpa always saying, if someone tells you to jump, don't ask questions. Just start jumping and they'll tell you how high to jump. And now it's become, if somebody tells you to jump, you ask how high. Well, no, you just fucking jump. You jump until you're told to stop, or you jump until they tell you to jump higher. And you can see, and that's, I think, my biggest pull away from this movie is, in the beginning, everyone's hoorah, hell yeah, I'm a Marine now, I'm gonna go fuck shit up, here we go. And then as you get farther in, they start questioning things like, well, that's a, you know, violation of my First Amendment right. Yes, it is, but you also signed all that shit away. Like, you don't get to question me anymore. This is how it's going to be, and you're just going to do it. So anyway, sorry, I just jumped on that one real quick.
Those are good points. And of course, you know, the dude who is there on the ground and, you know, who's especially in combat has a completely different mode than the people back at home, or, you know, the people looking at the elites who use these wars as their chessboard. I think that the oil thing obviously does play a huge role in it, but that's a century-long thing that began with, I suppose, with with Getty going over there and discovering oil, and then who was the guy? Kim Philby, the notorious English traitor spy who was part of the Cambridge group. His dad was an oil guy and went over there and converted to Islam. And then there's the shot. There's a whole thing with oil. I've got a great book on it in there. But there are other elements, obviously. I mean, in the 2000s war on terror, one of those was, of course, the poppy fields, and the largest, you know, Helmand province, and the largest, you know, opium crop in the world by far, which is interesting because that's inherited. It's like transferred from Vietnam. Vietnam has the Golden Triangle, and then we get the Golden Crescent, right? And everybody's seen, you know, the Fox News thing with Geraldo talking to the Marines, and they're guarding. We're guarding the poppy fields. I don't know. We've been told to do this, but you just do what you're told. I mean, that was kind of the, like, you know, I didn't care about any of that shit, right?
Because at the end of the day, my job was to fight and to protect my guys, the guys that worked with me, below me and above me, and, you know, ultimately people back home. You know, I mean, that's why I feel like that's what most of us do it for, and we never question any of that shit.
Yeah, there's one of the characters in the movie makes a good point of this when they start talking about oil, and he says, you know, he grew up around these oil guys his whole life in Texas. You know, they swim in it; it's in their veins. And then he says, you know, who do you think gave Saddam the weapons? We did. Yeah. So it's like, of course, there's the obligatory, like, conspiracy guy in the group, right, and then there's the crazy guy. But in the end, it's like, well, he says all that, but what difference does it make, like, within his actual group there? Because there's the scene with them taking the meds, right? And you know, they're issued these meds, and
isn't that something nowadays,
right?
Huh?
Right. Yeah. And I don't want to be too spicy, but it is very interesting.
I mean, I didn't question any vaccines or anything that I got.
Right.
Of course I do now, but now I have a choice. Back then, and you know, a lot of people talk about the religious choice. Well, I'm, you know, a Satanist or some shit, so I can't take this vaccine.
Don't forget they're watching.
Yeah, nobody did that. Like, you know, and we all wore our tags that had like Christian or Catholic or whatever it was. But dude, nobody claimed religious preference. Like,
well, Yeah,
let's
and
go.
again,
You know?
another thing, they actually show that in the movie because Jamie Foxx, the staff sergeant, right?
Yeah.
When they,
Yeah, staff sergeant.
when they first get their rifles, he mentions the 10 Commandments and thou shalt not kill, right? And he says they're Marines, essentially like, kill, kill, kill.
Yep.
But then later, when they're on the plane, and he's like hitting on the stewardess. There's a shot of we look over at Jamie Foxx and he's like sitting there with his glasses on. He's reading the Bible. So it's this
reading the Bible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's this interesting, dichotomy of like I guess Jamie Foxx in the movie is supposed to represent this like sort of purer version of like some kind of not a warrior, monk. He's not that, but he's got a different mindset with looking at his duty and his job than the guys that he's training.
That's a lifelong, not even that's a generational, triple generational, multi-generational long argument is, I'm a Christian. I don't talk like it, sorry. But I believe that you shouldn't kill. But at the same time, the Bible was literally full of wars, right? I mean, it's just something that it's, you're conflicted, but at the same time, you hear the saying, well, it's either him or me. Well, what makes you so righteous that it has to be you, right? Like these are battles that mentally a lot of people go through. And I'm sure, during Vietnam, I can only imagine. I mean, I've talked to a large amount of Vietnam vets, and I've asked them the same thing. They're like, fuck them guys, you don't get a lot of you don't get a lot of real emotional answers out of them. But that is something that, I think that was a struggle for many of the guys that portrayed in the movie, was that mental struggle. Like, they might put on that facade of like, kill, fight, all that, but in their heart and their mind, are they thinking that? Are they feeling that? Or does it eventually, kind of change the idea? Is it still considered murder if they're fighting back? There's all of these like these emotions and thoughts that run through the way that you think and the way that you feel, that it's definitely a conflicting ideology. It's been an argument for forever, as far as I know.
Right. Remember the Christmas scene in Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, dear Jesus. Right. There will be a magic show at 0900. Yeah, I think that we should get into the movie now, because one of the things, one of the things in the movie that happens is a sort of reversal of that, right? Instead of struggling with having taken a life, they struggle with not having taken a life. They've been in a war, in a combat zone, and they don't, they don't get their kill because the State Farm guy or whatever pops in and he's like, he wants to do a napalm death on the
State Farm guy. I've never heard of that. That's pretty good.
You guys should see these fireworks, right? All right, so the movie. So again, 2005, Sam Mendes, and the movie's directed by a great and well-known, established English theater director, which is interesting. And that kind of struck me at the time when I saw it. I was in England, and Sam Mendes was known he was the artistic director at the Donmar Warehouse, which is like a modern theater and Shakespeare. And he was married to Kate Winslet. And, so he does this war movie, this American war movie, which is not unusual. But one thing that does is I think it gives us, or he gives us, a kind of richer experience in terms of like the characters in the movie. And war movies in general do a great job of this. They do a great job oftentimes of showing us the characters and what they mean and how they fit into life because of the context, because war provides these sort of extreme circumstances. But this one does it particularly well because in a way, like the characters end up being like children, to this mother, the staff sergeant. He's sort of, he's like mother hen for them. And the way that they do all the things they're supposed to, but they have tantrums and they cry and they break the rules. And I think that's interesting because, it's sort of a new take, at least for me. You don't often see military movies portrayed in a familial sense like this. Like when you watch Apocalypse Now, you don't. I mean, they're kind of like when they're on the PT boat, like they're sort of a family,
Right.
but they're clearly soldiers, right? This one is slightly different. So I'm going to stop babbling here. Jake Gyllenhaal, we see him. He's at college. He's he's banging his girlfriend or whatever. There's a Led Zeppelin poster. He's living life, and he's a literary guy. He's an English major, and he kind of gets some sort of last chance, and he goes and he decides to sign up. We then see him, going into where is it that he receives his training? Is it Pendleton?
No, Paris Island.
Oh, he's at okay. Are all Marines trained at Paris Island?
No, I know that some. Okay, see, some of them used to go to Camp Pendleton. My grandfather was a DI there for a long time. I think they've been switching that up, like in the Army. It used to just be like only infantry in 19 series, so tankers and all them losers go through Benning. Now it's all males go through Benning. So I think they switched it up. I know they went to Pendleton at one point, but I just blanked the name on the one that we were just talking about. Paris Island. Jesus. That might just be like an infantry training center or something like that. It could literally be, who knows nowadays. They legitimately keep switching them up.
Right. So he goes into basic and he's, introduced to his drill sergeant, who anybody watching the movie is going to draw comparisons to Full Metal Jacket. Like you just do, obviously.
Yeah, instantly. Yeah. The first, like literally the first couple lines in my head when I first turned it on, because they start talking before you see who's talking and all that.
Yeah,
I legitimately thought that was R. Lee Ermey. Like I was like, oh man, this is cool. And then I remembered I was watching that. Fun fact: I actually lived about 2 miles from him for a good majority of my life. Met him saw him at the grocery store. Like, dude, that guy. Like seeing Full Metal Jacket and seeing him, I'm like, there's no way that this dude treated people like that. But at the same, but then after talking to him, I'm like, okay, it's cool that he can go from that to. He's just a regular guy at the grocery store. Like he's buying the same shit I am.
I'm shopping with my wife here at the Walmart. They've got golf balls and garden hoses here. All right.
It was actually a Winco, but whatever.
I know everybody in the chat knows this, but R. Lee Ermey for Full Metal Jacket. There was originally a different guy who was cast as the drill sergeant, and I know that Kubrick loved R. Lee Ermey because the one thing he did that the others, that the actors didn't do, was he had discipline, right? So he always hit his marks. He always knew his lines. He was always on time, and he was allowed to improvise his lines. He contributed to the written script. So I think that's pretty interesting that this authentic guy, like
he did that whole first scene, the whole drill sergeant scene, people call that, all in one take, all at once. There were no breaks in that. That was straight, like they said go, and he did the entire thing with no breaks, no nothing. That was all, and everything that he said he came up with. Like none of that was scripted or.
What a Chad, dude! That got ruled.
I've used a lot of his stuff.
So this guy is different. He's bulkier, he's a little different. And his language is not as salty, which is a reflection of, the times, right? Instead of using blatant the slurs that R. Lee Ermey does, he sort of softens it a little bit. And also, I guess the corporal punishment, right, is still there, but it's a little bit lighter. And I like it when he smashes his face into the thing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
He got lost on the way to college, right?
Yeah.
So
I was just, I guess for context, I was in the military after the whole stress card thing, because you used to be able to pull out a stress card and they'd have to leave you alone. So I was in after that. They tried it for a little bit and then they dumped it. Or if they didn't dump it, we didn't get it.
I've never heard of a stress card.
And honestly, it could be total and complete bullshit. I don't know. I've heard it. I've heard people talk about it. I've heard drill sergeants talk about it. So I don't know if it was like a trial thing or maybe like I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a crock of shit. Who knows?
That's crazy.
I was not like they were not allowed to physically. They weren't allowed to physically like punch us or hit us or slam our head into a whiteboard or anything like that.
Right.
The whole shark attack thing, if anybody's ever heard that, that is absolutely true. The first 24 hours was like, so the shark attack is, so when you go to the airport, then once you land in Georgia, they bus you to, what is it? 30th AG. It's the reception battalion. And that's like where you get all of your, you get your first haircut, get your PTs, get all your uniforms, a good majority of your stuff. You get all your medical stuff. I mean, it's just they just give you literally everything you need. Not everything you need, everything that they think you need when you get there. And then 7 days to 2 weeks, they send you what those drill sergeants call downrange, which is a term that we use to talk about deployments, but they use to go down. They say downrange to your actual training battalion. Once you they pack you on what looks like a school bus. If you take a school bus and you cut the motor off, put wheels on the front and the back, no windows, wooden bench seats, like just the trashiest little transportation thing. You get on those, they take you all the way down to your training battalion. And then as soon as you stop, here comes 3 of the, biggest, baddest dudes you could think of. And they literally, it's a shark attack because they just flood around you and make you feel like the most worthless piece of shit on the planet.
Wow.
Yell at you. You got to carry your duffel bags, so you're holding those over your head. I mean, they're pushing you to the absolute limit. You have people that want to quit. As soon as that starts happening, they're done. They're like, This is bullshit. I'm tired of people yelling at me. And it doesn't necessarily get easier. I feel like you just become a little bit more used to it, right? Like they're gonna yell. Nobody's gonna talk to you.
Sounds like pledge week for Kappa Sig UVA, man.
No. And I mean that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. To be completely honest, I mean it's literally 24 hours of just straight living hell. You're only required to be given 4 hours of sleep non-consecutively. So for our first night, I mean we call it smoking, push-ups, jumping jacks, iron mic. I mean whatever they can come up with, which they're not even allowed to do this anymore. But I mean it's whatever they can think of to torture you with for 24 hours.
Well, okay, so why explain to the folks at home, why do they do this?
So a lot of it, most of it, all of it is to break you down and make you kind of what I said earlier, like not question things. They're breaking you down to build you back up into what they want you to be. That's why haircuts are all the same. Especially in basic training, everyone gets the same haircut, no facial hair, even if it's acceptable, in AR 670-1, no mustaches, no nothing. Like they take everything away from you because you're all literally equally worthless to them until you graduate. You're a recruit. You don't know anything. You don't do anything, whatever. A lot of that, especially now. So I got out off active duty 10 years ago in April this last year. So a little bit longer than that. It wasn't, you always hear it's to build you back up, but it's not necessarily that. It's more so that they can actually train you. Like you're literally going into situations that nobody will ever have to go into with people you've never met before. You've only known for, 9 weeks in basic training. And then however long your, what they call advanced individual training, AIT is, you have they want you to all work together and to just say, hey, go do this, no questions. So most of it is just for training and to teach people like, hey, this is what I'm telling you to do. This is what you go do. There's no questions about it after that. But I mean, a lot of that also is safety wise. Like you put, 350 dudes on a range to go shoot AR-15s or M4s. Man, they're like, that's not a safe, that's not a safe environment at all.
So, okay, let me break in real quick. What do they do? Cause they're women. Where are the women? What do they do with them?
I don't know. So infantry until I think recently was all male. I guess now it's male and female. I'm assuming that they separate them. I don't know. So that was my first taste of. I don't think I saw a woman from the time I left the airport in Georgia until I graduated, and the next woman I saw was my mom and my grandmother. So like it's completely separated.
Right.
All dudes. I mean, I know that like in some of the female MOSs, they have like female barracks. Like if they go to Fort, what is it, Fort Jackson? Yeah, Slack and Jackson. That's what it's called. Like when you go there, they just have female and male barracks, but you'll have female drill sergeants and all that. We just didn't. It was all dudes.
Right. So they sort of initiate you into their into the system. I mean, and that's what it is. I mean, right, breaking you down, like you said, to build you back up physically,
mentally. Mentally is the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, the physical part will come as long as you don't give up. The mental part is what I mean. That was my biggest problem. Physically, I was fine, but it's the fear of the unknown that terrifies a lot of people. And that's probably one of the reasons now where fear of the unknown makes me laugh, because I'm like, really can't get any worse, right? Like, It can't be that bad. But yeah, the fear of the unknown and the mental game that's the tough part. Like I was terrified of heights, still am. And I remember being on top of Eagle Tower. We were rappelling down, and my drill sergeant, Carrig, maybe was his last name, I think. He was like, "Hey, you have to tie your own, call it Swiss seat. You have to tie your own. So your own rope. They teach you how to do it. You got to tie it." He goes, "Hey, I was getting ready to you walk backwards. I was getting ready to go down." He goes, "Hey, your seat's falling apart. You better get the fuck out of here. You're going to die." And I was like, "Oh shit." And I just let go and slid all the way down. But honestly, it's the mental toughness that really, like, that's the kicker. The physical will come. As long as you don't give up, you'll be fine. But like mentally, you really have to you gotta fight for that.
Did you see many people give up, like especially at the early stages?
Oh, tons. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I really don't think it was the physical part, because I mean, we didn't do anything like the gas chamber. Yeah, that's pretty bad. It sucks a lot. But they mentally psych you up. Like they mentally screw with you and make you want to give up. And the people that don't are the ones that kind of get through and make it all the way to the end. I remember the drill sergeant had us playing Duck, Duck, Goose in our barracks, like just to fuck with us.
Uh-huh.
Like we had people that I was 17. We had people that we had a guy, Castro, he was like 42 going through basic training. Yeah.
Really?
He might not have been 40. He might be like 37, but he was older.
Yeah.
And this motherfucker's playing Duck, Duck, Goose with a bunch of 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, you know?
Right. Okay, so that is like what I was saying earlier about the child, the child thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The purposely like infantilize. I mean, I'm not trying to philosophize this too much, I mean.
No, I mean, you're probably spot on. You've done a lot of research, and I'm just here to either back up your research or conflict it.
Well, it's interesting, the 42-year-old, it's like an apocalypse now, right? I was damn near 17 when they must have thought he was a far out old man humping it over that course. He was 38 years old. I know that, I don't know what the age limits are. I know that this is weird, but I know that the age limit to join the French Foreign Legion is 39. Because I've got an autobiography up there of a Scottish guy who did that. And when I first read that, I was like in my late 20s, and I thought like, no, you can still do that. And then when I passed 39 years old, I'm like, there's no way a 39-year-old could do this. But the Duck, Duck, Goose thing, so what's he doing? He's breaking you down, and he's, you're following orders. I know that in the movie, one thing that he does is Swofford says that he learned, a new vocabulary. He says a belt is still a belt, and like a tie is still a tie, but a shirt is a blouse, and like something is your dick is a dipstick or some shit like that. Your hands are meat cleavers. It's like everything gets a new
dumpster. Yeah.
Right. And also when he's getting tapped in the head, that shows you that the physical punishment is not severe. He's just getting taps in the head. But the drill sergeant says, like, how are you gonna how are you going if you can't think now, how are you going to think when, you're under fire or, what have you? And the next scene is where he's in the he gets his like placement and then he's in the bathroom, like
Dying.
he's chugging a laxative, right? And he's
Yeah.
like, he's reading Albert Camus, by the way.
Okay, see, I didn't know what he was reading.
Yeah, he's reading a French existentialist Camus. I think he's reading Stranger, the Outsider, which is interesting because that's what he is in the movie. And Jamie Foxx comes in and breaks down the door of the bathroom, grabs the book, and he says Camus. I like how he mispronounces the guy's name. Camus, interesting. And he offers him his job. He says, you can take it. And then we see him as the bugler, right? And
that was epic. Like,
yeah,
that was funny.
Oh, he also, when he first got there, is a great scene because we see the initiation of one of the Marines, who's now like a full Marine because he gets branded, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they act like they're going to turn on Jake Gyllenhaal and brand him, but they switch out the brands. And then later, Skarsgård will say, you got to earn it, which none of them have, right?
Right.
But the fact that he fights back against like 6 Marines, it takes like 6 of them to tie him to this bed. Later gives him some credibility with Jamie Foxx. He says, I heard, it took 6 guys to bring you down or whatever. So then he offers him the job for the scout sniper.
Right. That kind of talks to you. And the farther we get into this and the deeper into the movie and a little bit later on, that's the physical mental part. Like physically, he was tough as shit, right? It took 6 of these dudes to bring him down. But at the same time, you see later on in the movie where mentally he's fucking gone. Like he's dying. He's struggling to deal with it. So, you can be physically, I was probably about my size, just, a couple pounds lighter. And I was strong as shit, but mentally it took a little bit for it all to kind of catch in. And then of course, later on down the road, mentally you go back to shit. But that kind of proves that point. Like physically, yeah, he was a tough son of a bitch, but yeah, mentally later on, he's kind of struggling.
Well, one of the things that, when you're watching that scene, you're thinking, if you're in his shoes, you're thinking like it looks like these guys are going to roip him, right? Like they're going to tie him to this bed.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what it looks like. And it goes very far. But, he's also thinking logically like, nah, this is some Marine barracks. Like this is an act, which he's later right about. But I mean, he passes out.
Yeah.
When he's tied up. And like you said, his mentality needs to be, I mean, obviously Jamie Foxx's character sees that, with all these guys, it's like, they need to be built up. They need their mental strength to be tight. And it also reflects, honestly, it reflects what he's reading. He's like, he's looking into the void, he doesn't see a future. And he's going to have to like cross over this. Here's your word, guys. He has to cross over this abyss in order to face himself. And that is relevant because, of course, the guy that we're watching is the guy who wrote the book itself. Right. So it's just funny to me because in a lot of these books I read about the military, there's always one guy who is, mentally and his IQ, he's above the others, but his struggle is to find, where he fits in and what his purpose is. The other guys have their own things going on. But his insight into the situation, like we see how it develops as time goes on. And one of those examples is when they do the live fire exercise. Right.
Yeah.
And would this happen?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No. So, and I'm kind of confused. I'm assuming they had blanks back then. All of our training, we do have live fire training, like where you actually shoot, but you're shooting at a target. Nowhere, like you're not shooting even in the same direction as another soldier, recruit, training, officer, whatever. But we always use blanks, or then eventually they came out, and it might have been even before my time that they came out with them. Called a CCMK round. I don't remember what it stands for. Don't ask me. But it's like a compressed air round that has a paint pellet on the front. It kind of looks like a crayon with like a white netting around it. And they hurt like a son of a bitch. Let me tell you, right. I still got a scar on my hand from when one went through my hand. But but no.
So they don't have like anonymous dumbass up there, like with his like suppressive automatic fire. Just oops.
No. Now, I'm not the end all be all. Maybe in like that time, I doubt it. Like I highly doubt. Like, how do you explain that away? You know, we see Jamie Foxx over there and be like, "You stupid motherfucker! If you listened, you'd still be." Bro, like
Right.
I really don't think. I really don't think that happened. You know, I don't think that's a training thing.
Right.
Like I said, now there's blanks for literally. You know, there's blanks or call them training rounds. Like we have a 40 millimeter now that's like a belt fed. And it shoots chalk rounds, literally just a puff of orange chalk, right? And then now on deployments and other things, you have the HE rounds, but in training, you just use a chalk round, so it doesn't do anything. It just blows a poof of orange. But if you were in front of it, it would probably take your chest out. But you know, I have a hard time thinking that was no. I don't
right.
think
Yeah.
so.
I mean,
I think that's dramatic effect.
Yeah, we do, or we used to hear about, at least in Virginia, we hear about these military accidents, a training exercise involving a Black Hawk, went wrong. And I know that, the military's accountability is, I guess, amongst themselves. So, but yeah, I don't think this would, I've never heard of this happening. But, so that's their first, it's interesting because that's their first blood, right? I mean, they're blooded into this thing. The guy is, and there's no like we don't know who this guy is. This anonymous guy who stands up like in the barbed wire, which is really weird, right? There's like mortars going off, and the guy's shooting a machine gun. So he's like, "I'm out of here, man!" Yeah, and gets the pink mist from his. And they mentioned actually before that, because they got their rifles, and one of them said something about pink mist.
Yeah, JFK, the pink mist.
Right.
God, who did say that? Oh, it was Jamie Foxx that said it.
Yeah,
while he was on the range, and then Jake Gyllenhaal kind of like took that to heart and decided to kind of make that his motto, I guess, if you will, as a scout sniper.
Right. It kind of sucks when he's like 1, 2, and it's like, oh man, I don't get to pull the trigger, dude. I got to be the other guy. That sucks.
Yeah, that scene was interesting, and I never went to sniper school. I had an opportunity to go, and the stars just didn't align, if you will, or whatever the reason is you want to use. But I am kind of curious. I don't think that's the way they pick it. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna. At least if it was me picking, I would pick the guy that shoots the best to shoot, right? Like you're not just gonna go like duck, duck, goose. Okay, you're shooting. You're.
If I were in charge, I would pick the Puerto Rican guy from Clear and Present Danger, because that guy plays a sniper in every movie. Have you seen Clear and Present Danger? Harrison Ford.
I have not.
It comes after Patriot Games, and that guy is always the sniper. So you would pick that guy, but now you would probably pick the stunning and brave, Skittles person to pull the trigger. But
we're not going to jump on that tonight.
Right. So they give them their ghillie suits, which is interesting. And they sort of, they gloss over the technical things and kind of go into what it all means, right? And we do see that Skarsgård, this Skarsgård, this actor is, hold on, which one is he? Which Skarsgård? Is it Peter? He's not related to the other guys. He's not related to Stellan or the other two Skarsgård guys. One of them's in Dune. One of them's Alexander. One of them's there's 3 kids and there's the dad. This guy's not related. He's the real life. Oh, you know what? He's the real life husband of Maggie Gyllenhaal, Jake Gyllenhaal's sister. So I guess maybe they met in this movie.
Maybe it's completely possible.
This guy, he's an interesting actor because he has played, Gyllenhaal has played like a bunch of military roles. And
he's good at it though. Like just personal opinion. Like he has that, like the way that he looks, the way that he talks. By far, I think they could not have picked a better person to play, not necessarily just because of the way he talks, but his mannerisms, he looks straight, keeps it straight. I was talking to somebody else about Jarhead, and they're like, oh, maybe Denzel should have played Sergeant Sykes, and I was like Denzel or not Denzel, God, Samuel Jackson. Sorry, I get him confused. And I was like, he could talk the talk, and he could, but he can't. Denzel probably could have done it. Samuel Jackson would have sounded better, but just the look, the way that he acts, like the everything. Jamie Foxx, there's like nobody could compare in this one.
Yeah, those fellas. They're too old anyway. And Samuel Jackson was in a good Vietnam movie, Rules of Engagement.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, for sure.
And who's the other one? Denzel is great in Courage Under Fire, which is a movie about the same time frame. But those guys are too, like, I don't know, heavy for this role.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And but Gyllenhaal, is he's really good in this, and the casting is great. I mean, the Skarsgård guy is good because he's obviously flawed the first time we see him. We don't know what this guy's deal is, and we later learn, the sort of key to his character. He's a conflicted, guy, but in the beginning, he's like the adversary to Jake Gyllenhaal when he first walks into the barracks, and he turns out to be like, his sort of brother at arms, his kindred, brother, I suppose. And then, they get paired together in the sniper team.
So he's like he plays like so there's a, I don't know how to explain this. There's almost like not a stigma, but I guess that's the word I'm going to pick, where you have like a group of we call them just new guys, privates, they're the low guys on the totem pole. It doesn't really matter what their rank is. They're the privates, right? And then you have the guys that, have a deployment under their belt. And then you have your NCOs and all that, non-commissioned officers, your senior NCOs, all that stuff. And that's where he fits in. So he's the guy that, I don't remember if they specifically say if he had been to combat before. Maybe he just had, 2 or 3 years in, and then decides to, or then is put in, makes like a team leader position. In the Army, your E1 through E4 are typically your team leaders in E5, your squad leaders in E6, platoon sergeants in E7. So there's a reason that all the numbers kind of line up and the rankings work. But he's like that guy that has almost been hardened. So maybe he, maybe he was in Grenada or something, and that, that's kind of the role that he's filling. Is he's got some experience, whether it's in, Grenada, whether it's in just been there for a little while, and kind of had already been through some privates. He's definitely got that kind of, we'll call it older brother type,
right? And
mannerisms.
He was born at Scott Air Force Base in Belleville, Illinois. Interesting.
Crazy.
He was also, he was really good in, a little sidetrack here. He was great in, you know what he was good in? This series, The Looming Tower, which is about Michael Scheuer, who was he was the head of the Bin Laden unit. And he wrote that book, Imperial Hubris. He plays him in that show. And then he was also good he played like that psychologist who did the human experimentation trials about how far people would go to hurt the other people, like with the electric shocks.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He was in that. Anyway, my point is, with this guy that, I mean, look at him. He's an interesting looking guy, and not to get too far into this, but like one thing about film acting, because I trained as a theater actor, of course, you know this, but film acting is different because everything is in the eyes, and this guy and Gyllenhaal, like there's something in the eyes in these characters, especially this guy. He's he's like, he's got pain, and we see that towards the end of the movie. And I think it's interesting that like the movie setting of the war is where he reaches he's meant to be there. He's meant to go through this thing because apparently his life sucks so much. So they do their training or whatever, and what happens next? We get a glimpse into the life of the boring life, right? Of
right.
what they do, and he, So tell us about that. How much downtime is there?
So that completely depends on like where we call it the patch chart. It just depends on who's going where and when. That's all way, way, way above my pay grade, at least where I was at. So like when I got stationed here at Fort Hood in 2012, the unit that I was with here, they were already deployed. So we were on the rear detachment, which is, they were basically, the unit here was standing down is what we call it, a 19 series unit, and then standing up an 11 series unit. So all new vehicles, all new training, all new area of operation on post. I mean, everything was completely changing. So there was literally an ass load of downtime. That's where I got a lot of my classes in. That's where I got a lot of my other, a lot of the other stuff that I was able to get was because we were on rear detachments. Then once we got put on the patch chart to deploy, that's when things started kicking up. We're always doing field problems, going out in the field a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time, training with our vehicles, learning how to drive them. We were with Strikers here, which is like a 8-wheeled, what people think of when they see like an APC, armored personnel carrier. That's what a Striker is for the most part, without like tearing it down completely. So once we set up the unit, we were training 24/7.
So you got there, you said 2010, right?
That's when I went active duty. Yeah, 2010, right. And then 2012 is when I got stationed here. I was at Joint Base Lewis McChord before that.
So that was well after the big Fort Hood event in 2009.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's funny. So I didn't actually hear about that until 5, maybe 6 years ago. I had no idea.
Right.
Actually, take it back. I guess it would have been 2019. So 4 years ago, when the 10-year anniversary. I had no idea.
Yeah, Nadal Hassan. Was that the one with the astronaut's wife? You guys in the chat, who was she was a congresswoman, which resulted in the laws about the thing, being attempted to change, which is interesting. I saw a documentary it was like 2020 episode about all the people that go missing at Fort Hood. Is that a thing?
So obviously I'm not a, CID investigator, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know the everything that goes on around it, but Fort Hood is the largest, most populated military base, right? So like Fort Richardson, Alaska, I think, or not maybe it's Fort Wayne, right? I don't remember the name of it. Is technically bigger square footage wise, square miles, however they do it. But Fort Hood's the most populated. The amount of soldiers on Fort Hood is disgustingly huge.
Right.
So
you didn't go missing, though.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people that go missing. There's a lot of people, like training deaths is something that happens pretty often. But again, I don't think that's just for no reason. I think it's simply because it's the largest populated military base. Anytime you put more people into one area, something's going to happen, right? Like, right. It's just basic, science, math, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, there's definitely been, I think there's been like 3 or 4 in the last year. And a lot of it is they go AWOL. They just leave. They're tired of it. They're scared. They're whatever, or they just don't give a shit and they just leave and they never come back, or they're found. And then, there's a lot of reasons people go missing for sure.
So speaking of AWOL, I have a question. I'm blitzing you with questions here. So when people go AWOL, does the military take it as seriously as they do? How seriously do they take it?
A lot of that's based, at least, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with this. We had one guy that was AWOL.
He said that's based. A lot of this is based. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know what I experienced. I wasn't in active duty long enough to get super high up in the ranks, even to like an E5, E6, to have to deal with that kind of shit. But we had a guy that went AWOL, and he basically was what they call restricted to post, extra duty, so that everybody could basically keep an eye on the guy to make sure that he, didn't go AWOL again. But he was AWOL for like 4 years.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, like what? I don't know how people did that. I just remember that specifically because he came when they finally found him. He was higher ranking than me, and I'm like, what the? Like this dude's hasn't done shit. Went to basic training, that was it. Never reported to his unit. Was reported AWOL for 4 years or some shit.
He went AWOL because he was Jack Reacher, John Wick. Right. They had a
this was a fat, flubby, useless dude. So he didn't go like special forces or some shit. But yeah, I mean, it just, you know, and it's funny because we actually all thought that too. A lot of us were like, how's this dude come back from being AWOL for 4 years? He outranks half of us. And he was like really trying to interject into like every conversation. Like, this motherfucker's a snake. Like, there's no way this is real, right?
Yeah, there have been some pretty infamous examples of people that went AWOL. Was Chris Dorner in the Big Bear Cabin? Was he one of them, you guys? There was, of course, Mimothy McVeigh, the guy in the Oklahoma City event, who supposedly was AWOL. And then that guy was filming like a documentary about the base, and he was showing the inside of a armored vehicle, and there he was, like on camera filming, cleaning out the inside of this vehicle. So there he was, not AWOL. Somebody in the chat said, have you ever heard of the Presidio military base? Yeah, we can't really get into that. And Michael Aquino, that's a whole different area of military. But that is interesting, especially the fact that there are so many people. And one of the things about Desert Storm, Desert Shield, is that I remember is when this happened. Okay, when this all happened, I was in 5th grade, and it was a huge event that everybody like paid attention to, especially us, because we were in 5th grade, and we thought it was so cool because there was so much, like there were posters and T-shirts, and it was the galvanizing patriotic event. My friend had a T-shirt with Bart Simpson like peeing on Iraq.
Yeah,
and I got a Macintosh Classic computer for Christmas that year, and it came with one game, and the game was called Spit on Saddam. And it was like bleeps, and you were supposed to launch a Patriot missile, and it had to intercept a Scud missile, like just bleeps across the screen. And when you did that and you were successful, they showed a picture of Saddam, and you got to pick like what kind of spit you would choose, and then you like launched it at its face, which is crazy. Like this was for 5th graders, right?
If you did that now, you'd be canceled.
Right.
Quick.
Right.
When was this? 2005?
This is 1990 when Desert Shield came out.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I must have missed that part. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was supposed to go on a trip to England in the spring of that year, and it got canceled because of the war. I don't know why they canceled it, because of the war. And also I was supposed to go to a Richmond Renegades hockey game that night. And I remember having to stay home because the invasion, the bombing started. And that was CNN's thing. That's when they became big,
Mm-hmm.
And the Scud missile was like the evil. It even sounds evil, right?
Yeah.
The Scud missile versus the Patriot.
Yeah. So that was my experience with 9/11. I was in 3rd grade when 9/11 happened. And I lived on the West Coast. So that's actually how I learned about the time zones changing. Cause I'm like, how is it going to happen in the future? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I had no idea. But it was the same thing. They like locked down the class. They locked down everything, like the classroom. We still had to stay late at school that day.
You were in 3rd grade. You were in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. Were you in a classroom being filmed, and the president was there, and he was reading My Pet Goat to you?
No. I forgot about that. Yeah, it was HW, wasn't it?
It was W.
W, yeah.
Yeah.
W.
Yeah.
Sorry, not a history major.
We're gonna continue Daddy's war of these terrorists.
These terrorists.
All right. So so what happens in the movie, by the way, is that I forget where they are, but they learn about the thing happening in Kuwait. And then they go into this movie theater and they watch Apocalypse Now. They're watching the Ride of the Valkyrie scene with the helicopters. And that is an interesting scene because Swofford actually later comments on sort of that sort of cultural movement, because there's a scene where they're out in the desert and like a helicopter flies by and it's playing like I don't know, it's playing like Creedence Clearwater Revival or something. And he's like, that's Vietnam music. We need our own music.
Yeah.
And they're watching this, Vietnam war movie, and they don't have their own things yet. So it's just funny because even at that moment, they're conscious of the fact that like they have to have their own current, war culture. And one of the things that I remember about Panama, the Panamanian invasion, was that they always claim that they got Manuel Noriega out of his mansion by circling the mansion and like blasting, decadent American rock and roll, Skid Row and Guns N' Roses. But you think about it and you're like, dude, why would that drive anyone crazy? Why would that make you leave the house listening to Skid Row and Guns N' Roses? It doesn't make sense. So I think what they were actually doing was, blasting like ultra high frequency or low frequency at him to make him come out of the house. And of course, Noriega was another version of Saddam, a guy who had been propped up by intelligence and funded, and that we later, had to call in. And I guess he wouldn't come back, so they invaded. That was HW's invasion. So anyway, so yeah, in the middle of the movie, they're interrupted, and over the speaker, the guy says, we're going to war. You're going to go be deployed. Get some Marines, get some, in a kind of lackadaisical voice. And they learn they're going to war. And of course, this is the greatest thing in the world for them because they're Marines. So then there's this like weird sequence of events where they are galvanized, they're jacked up, they're going to go to war, but they still got to get over there. So they're on like a Delta flight, right, flying over to the Middle East. And I just think that's so funny because I think people probably picture deployments being like lots of soldiers or Marines like on a military jet, right, or a transporter, but it's not. It's a civilian airliner. And they even, they have the little exchange with the stewardess.
Peanuts.
Yeah.
So there's always that group. Like you always have, especially once you really get to know your team, you always have like there's one person who's the jokester, right? Like and it doesn't matter what happens, it's funny. Like he will find a way to turn that shit into something funny. Then you have like the ladies' man, right? And at least for me, we had like a ladies' man who was a real ladies' man, and then one that like was him, and he just tries too hard. Like that girl wanted nothing to do with him, right? But he was like, I don't give a shit. I'm still gonna try a third time when I leave the fucking plane, And then you've got the one guy who's like serious and like not down, but I don't know, melancholy. Maybe that word's right. You always have that guy. But you always like the way that they depict them, and then you have the guy who's like been in love with his high school sweetheart for 3 years, blah blah blah, and that always ends badly. Just in case anyone's wondering, any high school sweethearts are not. That's not a thing in the Army. Jody's real.
Is that actually what they say? Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Jody.
Wow.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a real thing. The Jody thing is real. Like even in basic training, like, did you get a letter from Jody? I'm like, fuck you, man. No, that's absolutely 100% real.
So, when do you you're talking about you're going out to talk to girls and stuff. Is this when you get leave, and you got in uniform and like you go to the local bar, or like what happens?
Yeah, you can do that. So going out and like your ACUs, DCUs, multicams, whatever, some people call them fatigues.
Yeah.
Those you don't go out, you don't go out in. That's like reserved for training, combat, everyday work, blah, blah, blah. A lot of guys like when you do like the Marine Corps ball, or like other real big special events, you go out in your blues or something. That's typically what happens. Like we were in like San Antonio or something, and it was the night of the Marine Corps ball. And so they had a big event in San Antonio. And then like 10 of them came down to the bar we were at and just shut that motherfucker down. Like they let loose, man. But yeah, that's typically what it is. Like you go out in your blues, or we had greens. I think I was one of the last people to get issued greens, or last basic training unit. And then now the Army has blues, which look like Coast Guard uniforms to me, but that's for another conversation. But yeah, when you go out and you're dressed uniform, that's kind of when people think it's fancy and you look nice and
And do you go out and pick fights with the Coast Guard and the Navy and the Marines and you?
Yes, it doesn't all happen in like one bar. Like you don't get like what was that movie, The Guardian, where like the Navy and the Coast Guard are fighting?
Yeah.
Yes, there is. So kind of like I said earlier with like making fun of the tankers. So the Marine Corps thinks they're better than everybody else. The Army knows we're better than everybody else. The Navy is they're gay. Like everybody has like their own. We all make fun of each other, and there's a joke like we've earned that right. Like I make fun of Marines because they're typically dumber than shit, but they're really strong. They make fun of us because of whatever the word was. Everyone's got like their own niche. We all talk shit to each other, and it's
Right.
banter. It's now if you haven't served and you talk shit, we're all going to come for you,
Right.
Like except for the Coast Guard because they don't even matter. Actually, I think the Space Force took their spot as not mattering. But anyway, like yeah, we all kind of banter back and forth. I've never been in a fight with some guy in the Navy because I made fun of him. But yeah, there's definitely like some banter there for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's real.
I have a friend who was expelled from the Navy for fighting like that.
Yeah, my buddy's dad got into a similar situation at a port in like the Philippines or some shit and got kicked out.
Right.
It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. I've never been in a fight like that.
Well, look,
we all make people.
If you're a Green Beret and you go to a bar, your hands are deadly weapons, right? So if two guys are picking on you in the rain outside and you got like a bad Southern accent, you're going to end up as Con Air.
Yeah.
Right.
That was good. I like how you broke that down real good there.
But no, they there's no bars when they go to the Middle East. They end up in the sand and they go to this tent, and Chris Cooper is the colonel or whatever, and he said, and people forget like that the major PR figure, like the magnetic figure of the time, was General Norman Schwarzkopf, right? Mm-hmm. Who like Chris Farley played him on SNL, and awesome. the sector, right? He was like this larger than life, like gigantic dude that I wrote a letter to him when I was in school, hoping he would write back. He didn't write back, but Richard Petty did, you guys. So I still have that letter. And so they go to this tent and they listen to his speech. And basically he tells them, we don't know. The politicians have a lot of jawboning to do. That's what he says. And it's a lot of oil. And, just sit, hydrate, wait. And one day, maybe we'll get to take the war to Saddam, who has, done these horrible things to the Kurds, which now, well, it doesn't matter to these guys, right? But the reasons for this whole thing are like so wild, right? The testimony from the daughter of the ambassador, right? And Colin Powell, like going along with this and all that stuff. Yeah. Incubators, all that. But regardless, they were there for like, I think Desert Shield was about 6 months, and they were just chilling. And they had all these people there, and it was this gigantic thing, and they were waiting on the border for their, he says, even the colonel says something about our friends in the Saud kingdom. We're going to, they're going to take care of us or something like that. And so then we get into the antics of what they do while they're waiting, which is a constant state of readiness, right? But is actually a lot of like shenanigans, tomfoolery. Jamie Foxx is like trying to keep them in line. They do gas attack practice. They run in the heat with their masks on and all this stuff. There's the one dude in their group that is the most unlikable guy. He's the kind of crazy guy who looks like Flea, from Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's the one who wants to shoot the camels and all that stuff. And he actually goes full on like Phoenix program when they're out in the desert, and he like starts collecting what does he call them? Crispy critters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That guy sucks. But they basically they're just chilling and they're waiting for this thing to start. And there's just a whole lot of there's just a whole lot of nothingness. What's your take on that? Like, first of all, how do they do it in the film? Do you think they do it accurately? And what is it, by the way, what does it say about, I don't know if it's necessarily the American, military per se, but because I guess everyone would do this. But one thing I think that's interesting about this movie is that a lot of military films are, propaganda. They get funding from the military, and this one I'm sure is no exception. But these scenes are pretty good because they're critical. They're obviously critical of the thing, right? The journalist comes to talk to them and asks to speak to, and they're supposed to give their opinion, but none of them really say what's on their mind, especially the conspiracy guy who says nothing, right?
A lot of that is personal, meaning not necessarily something that we might keep close to the chest, but everyone's thoughts are different, everyone's opinions are different, because that's the only thing that you have left after you start to you get out of base training, you go to your first unit. Typically, everyone's got a different time frame. Some people it's 3 months, some people it's 9 months, people it's 2 years before you deploy. Just kind of depends, but you start to get this individuality back, and it's just whatever you have in your mind. It's whatever you can think of. It's whatever, however you feel about it. Now, you don't really voice that. At least we didn't. We didn't really talk about politics or anything while we were in the military or on active duty. I mean, I'm sure that some people do. They do give you time to go vote and stuff, but nobody really we didn't question it. We didn't talk about it. We didn't, that just wasn't a thing. But the way that the colonel talks to him, the way that Jamie Foxx kind of talks to him in the movie, it's a sight game. To get to a full bird colonel, that dude's probably been in the military for a good long while. To get to a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, I mean, it all depends on promotion points and all other stuff. But obviously, he's been in there for a while. So they've probably seen some shit and done some shit, and so they're a little more hardened, and they know that morale is a huge part of it. If you're happy and you're feeling charged, you'll go do some really stupid shit. But if you're not and you're down on something, then your response is gonna be different. You'll still go do it, but maybe you won't go do it to the best of your ability, or maybe you won't go try as hard as you should. I mean, there's a lot there that mentally and emotionally that just they do a good job of portraying, at least in my opinion, in the movie. The suspense is terrible. The fear of the unknown, they think they're there to just kill Iraqis, and Colonel's this is what we're gonna do, but we gotta wait. We gotta wait till this happens or that happens. And that suspense and the fear of the unknown is what really mentally plays on people, especially the first time in that position, not knowing what's coming. That's why training is so repetitive and monotonous, and you do the same shit over and over and over and over and over again, is exactly for that reason. You have to, it's muscle memory.
Right.
But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, they absolutely did a good job kind of portraying the attempted morale booster, along with kind of everybody getting settled. So after they talk with Chris Cooper, they go into their tent and they're kind of getting their shit together, and they do the gas training and all the other stuff. The morale is high at that point. And then the journalists kind of come in, and you've got, some people that are pissed off because they can't talk about it. Jamie Foxx is like, fuck you, you're not going to say anything. And a lot of that has to do with what we call OPSEC, operational security. The American people, not that it's right, but they're told one thing or told two things, or, they're told, hey, we're going over here, we're just going to protect oil, right? That's what they tried to push out. But in reality, that may not be the case. And so, they're told not to talk about it. Don't tell them, what your rules of engagement are, what your, all that stuff.
Yeah, so you can't get there and be like, my latitude and longitude is this, and tomorrow we're going here, and
you get your fucking ass kicked.
and by the way, I saw Saddam's palace, and it's like totally rocking, dude. Like they've got gold, and he's just chilling. No, I'm being facetious, but I do have a friend who is a colonel, and he did I don't know how many deployments he did. He was there for Tikrit and what's the other big one? The other big offensive they did in Iraq in like 2000. Yeah. Well, he was there for a bunch of shit, and he was there when they found Saddam in the hole, in the hiding hole. He wasn't one of the guys who took him out. I'm not going to say like who he is or what he did, but he was there, and he's got stories that, he'll tell me occasionally, like he slept in Saddam's palace. It had been, he got there and it was bombed out and destroyed. And he slept like in one of the big rooms in the palace. And he said he woke up like with a rat gnawing on his toe. And he's got all these, like all of these Saddam bucks, because Saddam, like all Saddam's cash was just lying around. Now it's worthless, but he'll give it out to people, and he's got one of Saddam's clocks, which is a picture of Saddam. But he said,
that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and I just think that one of the interesting things about this whole thing is that here's the kind of other war that was going on at the time, which was, of course, like the special forces operations. And this is when like the Bravo 20 thing happened with SAS. And while this is going on, of course, they send in special forces ahead of time, and they set their bombs and they go over the lines and all that stuff. And what you were saying about the, talking to reporters, even the reporter being there is like, it just seems to me like total bullshit, right? It's like, even if you say something spicy, the reporter is there to report the things that the military wants for the American people to digest.
Right.
There's a movie called War Machine with Brad Pitt, and he plays it's a kind of a parody of Stanley McChrystal. Remember, Stanley McChrystal was the head of JSOC, and Rolling Stone like embedded the reporter with him. And then he got fired. He's like the only general I can think of who got fired. Obama fired him, and because he was saying all this spicy stuff or whatever. But that whole thing like kind of reeks to me of we need a fall guy. We've got intelligence things that we're working with. Petraeus was the big hero at the time. Right. Just the whole thing is like full of all these shenanigans. But then going back to this, it's like the guys, the boots on the ground, as they call them, are just sitting there waiting. And one more point here is that there's such a stark contrast between the way these guys are portrayed. This is like 1990 versus the way that the guys are portrayed, like in the, what do they call them? The fire. What do you call them? Fire. Like they're in like way out in Afghanistan, in 2004, and like the dude's fighting. He wakes up to being mortared, and he's like fighting in his boxers. You remember that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the transition from this war to that war, even though it's just 10 years, it's like they had all this time also to get like the propaganda machine, like to get it right. Right.
Well, they also, and that's what's funny about the whole reporter thing is they also like, they didn't tell us, I mean, obviously they were in the beginning. There's no way that they gave them a whole lot more information other than, this is your mission today. This is what you're responsible for today. If it's guarding, oil rigs, if it's guarding, a command post or something like that, you didn't get a whole lot more than that. So and that was when I was in. So I can only imagine that when this all happened, it was probably, even the staff sergeant had no fucking clue what was going on. He was just getting the orders from, his superior and taking it down to the next guy.
Right.
So, that was definitely a propaganda type, you know, throw in there. You know what I mean? I don't know if that word makes sense, but there was definitely some fishy shit there for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing is the way that even the Marines are, straight up are portrayed in this. It's like we had Nam, and that was this whole thing, right? And then we're reeling, in the public consciousness for years from Nam, and everything's compared to Vietnam, and meanwhile, like for instance, the Russians are fighting the Chechen war, and all these other groups are constantly at war in all these other places, but we're just chilling, right? And then this war happens. It's very brief. It's a total victory. It's a propaganda victory. But then, of course, Bush loses the election, which that's got to be like, I mean, I don't know. It would not be prudent, right? So he goes to war. He has the Panamanian thing, and then he has Desert Storm, which is like this huge victory, very popular. And then he loses, and then Clinton comes in. We have no military action except for the Baltic, right? And then there's the bombing of the embassies, and then that results, of course, in W winning, and then continuing his father's war because of the WMD, right? Saddam has WMD. Hans Blix is on the case. We're going to find out, that they've got all these chemical weapons, which again, I'm not trying to go off here, but again, is just it's just irony incarnate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have those, and we gave them the capabilities, and we funded the Iraqi military to fight the Iranians in the Cold War, and then we call in Saddam. I guess he didn't want to play ball, so then we go into this. And anybody in the chat, if you're interested, the book, the Smedley Butler book. You guys, what's the Smedley Butler book? The guy who won the Medal of Honor twice. He was in every major military action for like 30 years. Remember, what is it? Basically, he realized that the U.S. military, Jath, what's the name of Smedley Butler's book? He realized that the U.S. military, especially the Marines, were just the foot soldiers for the bankers. And there's one part where he was in South America, actually, and he learns from his superiors. War is a racket. Thank you. He learns from his superiors that
you got like 5 people that said that.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, the bankers basically, and the higher ups don't want whoever it was. I think it was in Nicaragua. They don't want that guy in there anymore. And Butler says in the book something like, "What do you want me to do with him?" And all these people, and they basically, they tell him, well, get rid of them, eliminate them, like they got to go. So he actually went to the president. This was before Somoza, and he went there and he said, "Look, I shouldn't tell you this, but the plan is that everybody here is going to be like, you're going to be whacked. So I'm giving you this chance to go." And the guy actually took it and left. But what he's showing you in the book is that it's this story of like, we find an economic interest or some sort of interest or a power base, and then we offer them things, and then we go in, and then if they don't play ball, then we send in the military, and then there's a full invasion. And his point in the book is that he realized this, he was just a tool, and that he was tired of it. And I think that with this whole war, like, certainly just continues, right? It's a continuous, never-ending process. But in the movie, of course, none of that really matters. They see the oil. Desert Storm starts. They go. They learn that the oil fields are on fire. They're out in the desert. And this is by far, like, this is the most visceral scene in the movie. This is great. They come upon like a bunch of people that have been like irradiated or something. Like, they're just carcasses, right? The sand is even like charred black when he's walking on it. And then, of course, the oil fields get set on fire, and they have to like stick around in the shit, right? In the suck. And that scene where it's raining oil. And of course, the one guy's like, "Y'all seen the movie Giant with James Dean?"
I forgot about that part.
And but then, like, when it's fire and oil and that horse walks by, right? And it's just Gyllenhaal, and there's there's like a Lipizan or one of Saddam's horses in the desert just walks by, and it's a powerful scene, and it's poignant, because for one, like Gyllenhaal or Swofford, he's with all these guys, but like you realize when you're watching it that he's still alone, right? It's just him, and that we don't know what's going to happen to the other people. Like when he goes off, by the way, one of the guys is like, "Don't die."
Yeah,
they're bonded together, but it's all tenuous, and the horse is so beautiful, and you feel like I know I'm kind of being emo here, but it's like you feel like this scene in the movie symbolizes the fact that, for one, this beautiful country, right, is about to be completely destroyed. It's going to be destroyed,
obliterated.
Right, it's going to be obliterated, totally, looted and all this stuff. And it's a war, but it's just very sad. It's a sad series of events, and the horse just, of course, walks into the darkness. And then there's the following scene with Jamie Foxx, which is my favorite part, where the guys, they're burying the crispy critters, and he says, do you know why I do this? I could be back at home in Compton. My brother has a business and my wife is there and all this stuff. I could be, and I got my kids, but do you know why I do this? And he says, because I love this job. Hoorah.
He says, I love this shit.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and that builds or creates the career guy. Like there are some, it's a terrible thing, but there's E6s staff sergeants, sergeant first class, even some E5s, some sergeants that like, this is all they fucking know. They've been married 3 times, got, 4 different kids or 4 kids and from 3 different mamas. And this is literally just all they fucking know. And I think that's what they try to portray in that guy is, it was a newer war. But that's what was coming, so they made the move in 2005. All this stuff was supposed to be based in the 90s. That's 15 years, right? Or shit, even call it 10 years that they're trying to portray that hardened, like, this is me. All I know how to do is fight, fuck shit up and go on and do it again tomorrow, so they did a really good job portraying that kind of like hardened, I don't want to say hardened criminal ideology because that's not the right word, but that's all this guy knows. That's all he knows how to do. He's married to the core. I've heard that so many times. I don't even want to say it. Married to the military. There's guys out there that are like that. And that's literally all they know. That's all they do. They couldn't make one marriage work. So they tried it a second time, couldn't make that one work, tried it a third time. And that one failed too,
Yeah.
They did a really good job of portraying like, kind of that just hardened, like, you almost want to feel bad for him because that's all he knows. But at the same time, you have a lot of respect for him because that he's seen some shit and done some shit, it's kind of a weird, like,
shit, man, and some stuff.
Yeah.
Like even when he's sitting there, and they're sitting, by the way, in like the grave, and they just haven't thrown the guy into it yet, which is interesting. But the way they show Jamie Foxx, his head looks huge, dude. He's got this big bald head with the shining, burning oil coming off of it. And I think you're right. Like, he's a hard guy, right? He's career military, but like, maybe it's just the way he portrays him. He's got a lot of heart, obviously. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't say so, but he cares for these guys, and he cares, for the core.
Right.
And at the end of the movie, by the way, when they all go back to their lives, they show him and what he's up to, and he's like busting down doors in the current war. That's what I assumed.
Yeah.
That it, like and you said, he's still there. Right.
And that's kind of what so the guys, especially a lot of the really, the long time 15, 16-year career guys, like they have figured out that and this is going to sound absolutely terrible, but it's true. They figured out that they can't love or be loved by a woman or another person or whatever it is. And so they literally put every ounce of their being into the military. And then over time, it becomes that they've no longer put that love, time, and energy necessarily into the military, but into the next generation of guys. And those are the people that create soldiers, create warriors. I have I mean, probably one of my best friends in the world. He's 20 something years older than I am. I actually met him at a job that I worked, probably 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. And he was a sergeant major, and he was a platoon sergeant in the original invasion of Iraq. And I mean, I've got more respect for this dude than anybody ever in the world. And he actually did make a marriage work. One marriage shut the whole thing, which is crazy. But he the only thing he knew, the only thing he loved, probably more than his wife, and if he ever sees this, he's gonna fucking shoot me, was the military and training like that next generation of soldiers. The love and everything that these dudes have is totally and completely just, I mean, you can't match it. And that's, like I said, I think they did a really good job with Jamie Foxx, and he did a good job portraying that kind of like hardened badass, keep doing this shit again, over and over and over and over again. And I'm going to teach the new guys how to be the badass that I wish I was back when I started. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. 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 Pretty profound points. I mean, I think that, yes, obviously there's a sadness to that, and the lack of love thing. But I think that, I mean, isn't that the sort of noble war, isn't that the warrior tradition, since time immemorial, right? I mean, you imagine like Marine, if the US military is the Roman infantry, right? The hoplites. To me, it's like, it's a carryover from that.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. It's, this is your duty, and, you go back home and you have your life when you can, but it can't all be like Cincinnatus, right? But like the noble guy, putting down his sword and picking up his plowshare. Like the reality is that, the people that I guess that you need in these things, like the guy, for instance, who was the guy I did the stream. Remember you guys, I did the stream on, Finding the Jackal, right? Carlos the Jackal. And the guy who wrote the book was like a 78-year-old, Green Beret who, they call these guys, right? This guy like knew the locals, and he'd been in the Middle East, and he spoke, Farsi and all this stuff. And he'd been there since like the 70s. And he's this far out old man, right, who has to be there to like reinforce for the younger guys, what the dealio is. I think that I know a guy who, I'm 42 and he's like 45, and he's got a whole other job now, which is just extra because he did his 25 years in the military. He was a chef, and it's like he's already lived his whole life, doing this, and I guess it provided all this stuff for him, and he gets his fat pension or whatever. But it's also different from like the usual movie that we see, which is like Zero Dark 30 or American Sniper, right? These ultra propaganda films, but that focus on special forces, which is a completely different area that's not touched on in the movie, by the way. My question is, did you ever come across those guys? The bearded, special teams dudes.
I mean, I know, not necessarily. There's a Ranger battalion up at Fort Lewis, but I didn't really have any hangout with those guys. Right. There is a special forces recruiter at Fort Hood. And oddly enough, the one dude I met, who was special forces, was actually out of the military, just about 3 years ago, maybe. And I mean, no offense, love the guy to death, but he is like the so not typical special forces badass. Like he's like 5'5", super skinny, like clean shaven, clean haircut, looks like a fucking doofus.
He
Like
must be like he must be like Joe Pet, like in Family Guy. They talk about in the '90s the bad guy was Joe Pesci, right?
yeah.
The psychotic
Like, he's just
guy.
he is not like when you think special forces, you know, you and this is me too because I've never hung out with them, never talked to them. Same with Ranger Battalion. I mean, so you can get Ranger tabbed, which means you go through Ranger school and then you can be in a Ranger Battalion. Two different things. And like I never, like, our captain was Ranger tabbed, a couple of our E7s were, but you know, nothing crazy. But I didn't get to hang out with them. But like the way that American Sniper, you know, even what's the one with Mark Wahlberg?
12 Strong. No,
no, not that one. That was a good movie, but no, not that one. No, my gosh, what is it?
Mark Wahlberg. Okay, he's in Sniper, where he plays.
No, it was recent.
No, Shooter is that one.
No, yeah, Shooter. No, it's not that one. Damn, I just watched it the other day too.
12 Strong is the Green Berets on the horses.
Yeah, right? That was that one was good too. Dang, I don't remember the dang name of this movie. But he, you know, it was a special forces group, and they, like, you know, they're Billy Badass, got beards, and you know, they're just big badass, you know, whatever. But this dude,
that's the one where they start off and they do like the creed of the Frog Man at the beginning. God,
I can't think of this freaking name. But anyway, like the typical portrayal, you know, like you look at a special forces guy, and I am not anywhere near them, will never be as cool as those dudes, but they look, you know, like me, got a beard, tons of tattoos, like they just look that part. But it is so, like, this dude, he had like 2 tattoos. One was really bad. One was really good. And he's just not like lone survivor. Yeah, I knew it would come. But yeah, like they portray like these badass, you know, just cool ass dudes. And not that they're not cool, but the way that movies in Hollywood portray them is, you know, the couple that I've met, the recruiters I've met, the one guy I know who's SF, like, he's just a regular ass dude. And he's, honestly, I'll give him this. That is the hardest, because he actually worked for me at another job that I had when I was the GM, and he was the hardest working dude I ever met. Like, by far, you know, the hardest working dude. But when you look at him, you're like, he's probably a cook, right? Like, no offense to cooks. We love the cooks and medics. Those are 2 people we love as infantry anyway. Like, he just doesn't look the part, you know, not the Hollywood part that everybody, you know, has kind of got their mind wrapped around on.
Right. Yeah. The best movie of all time is 1990 Navy SEALs with Charles Sheen, Bill Paxton, Michael Biehn. It's called Navy SEALs. It was my favorite movie when I was 10 years old. I had the poster in my room. And that, honestly, that movie, by the way, like, drove recruitment way up.
Right.
And that it also, I think, introduced like the term Navy SEALs like to the general public, because they make a point of doing that in the movie. You know, SEAL stands for sea, air, and land. And they go to like Beirut or something. No, but that was a great movie when I was 10. But I think that, you know, I've got some great books on this, by the way. I've got a book by the guy who Beckwith, the guy who founded Delta Force, his book on Delta Force. I've got a bunch of SAS books and, you know, SEAL books. And I think that, you know, these guys have become so, like, that class of people has become so, like, canonized in the public's mind, because of 20 years of war and all this stuff. And I don't think I've ever known anyone in any of those things. But my buddy did tell me that the one who was in Iraq said that basically at the base over there, they had their own section, they had their own stuff. You know, you had some interaction with them. But what's interesting is that the more time goes on, I think we learned that the way these things work, and that, you know, they essentially, like, when you're young, you think of like super secret spy assassins as like, you know, these Bond types, and, you know, but in terms of the operations, it's just like JSOC, right? Intelligence needs a paramilitary arm or a activities division, so they just go to, you know, a Green Beret unit, right? Um, that's where they got born in the movie, you know, the Jason Bourne movies.
Mhm.
They need somebody with like independence and, you know, operational skills and all this stuff. Again, totally different from like Vietnam, where you had the LRPs, the long range reconnaissance patrol, and ears for beers, and, you know, they take some psycho and they're like, go out, wreak havoc, and come back in 30 days, you know, with heads. I mean, I'm sure that I remember. I have what's his name, Eric Prince's book on Blackwater here, and he talks about Phoenix program and how he, remember a few years ago, he was, Trump almost made him an advisor for the region, and he wanted to implement a new Phoenix program, which is it's a crazy world we live in. But suffice it to say, okay, so the movie, so after that scene happens in the movie, they get their orders, and now they, like, these two guys are tapped, and they're going to go actually take out some Republican guard, right? So they get their sniper orders, and they make their way over to wherever, and they like walk up into this tower, and they got their target, which is very easy. It seems very easy in the movie. They just like walk up into the tower, they look through the binoculars, and there's two Iraqi dudes, just, you know, and they're sitting there like yelling at each other like in the window, and the other guys can't see them. And they're about to pull the trigger. They're like 3, 2, 1, fire, fire. And then the State Farm guy busts in. Right. And he's like, put that away, Marines. We're going to have a fireworks show here. And Skarsgård goes insane, loses his mind because I mean, he really does break. He breaks, and he wants to get his kill, because in his world, you know, in this paradigm, in this
that's
warrior,
all they've been taught. Like, that's all they know. That's all they want to do.
Yes, and it's given him meaning, by the way. One of the things that happens prior to this is the nerdy guy with the glasses, who, by the way, later shows up in the Hurt Locker. He does something. He messes something up, but it's not really his fault, by the way. And of course, that gets Gyllenhaal in trouble, and then he comes back and has his rifle, and he's like about to totally break. And this is, by the way, the first movie example, I think, of using that Nirvana song, "Something in the Way," which was later used in Joker. But like, his mind is breaking, and he's going to shoot this guy, right? But he doesn't, and he gets it together. And then later, Skarsgård actually, you know, goes crazy, tries to assault the colonel in the tower. You are way out of line, Marine.
I think that part, the part towards the end where they're like the whole Christmas thing with the hat and the I can only assume it's hooch or you know, homemade wine,
right?
All that kind of portrays to the, and I keep bringing this up because, like, as you were talking with about like some of these special forces guys and the books that they've wrote, you know, I read, I don't read a lot, if ever at all. I read American Sniper, and like when you look at all of these things, it's all the mental game, and that's what this movie does a really good job portraying, is the mental battles that, you know, morale can be up. You know, you saw the guy, like, when they were in the little, we'll call it a cob or fob, you know, their little like tent thing. They watched the movie, and it's, you know, this dude's wife getting railed out by somebody else, you know, and all of those things is as minuscule as it might seem when you're at war or you're going to war. You see this, you know, your wife or your girlfriend or whatever who left you for this guy or whatever. All of those things, they bottle up, and they eventually kind of, you know, explode at some point. And I think that's where, you know, even Jake Gyllenhaal, when he was trying to teach that actor, I like that guy too. I can't remember his name. Fergus O'Donnell.
Yes.
When he, you know, he points the gun at him, and I mean, all that is like a perfect example of like the mental state that occurs when you go into situations like this, you know, and that's something that most people will never understand. But it's definitely real, and they did a really good job of portraying like that I don't know what that idea. They did a really good job kind of moving that in that direction.
Yeah, it's interesting that the guy that, you know, he pulls the gun on or whatever, like you were saying, Fergus, is the guy that he connects with at the end of the film, right? One of the only, you know, one of the other survivors. And also the scene, you know, you were saying how they bottle it up. And of course, you know, I'm sure the military doesn't mind this in the sense that, you know, bottle it up and then, you know, release it with gunfire later. And of course, when they lose their shot and they come back across the desert and they think like, oh no, the Republican Guard has come and they're slaughtering all our people, and they're like at the crest of this giant dune, you know, and it's silence, and then they see like the gas masks, you know, on the rifles, and they're like, oh no, everybody's dead. There's a warning sign, and then they go over the crest and they they hear Public Enemy, and and they go down.
Everyone's like partying.
Yeah, they're drinking their, you know, hooch, you know, jet fueled like toilet wine or whatever, and of course Jamie Foxx is now like a different person, right?
Mhm.
It's time to celebrate. He comes up and, you know, have a cigar and all this stuff. He's got like a Santa hat on, like you said, and then these two guys are like, you know, I never fired my weapon, and then they, you know, they pop off a desert pop, and then everybody releases gunfire.
Yeah.
Including Fergus, by the way, who's got, you know, the
So
saw or whatever.
Yeah. That's not real. You have to account for every round, so that's bullshit. But it did a good job of portraying like that explosion, like that all these, you know, it's such a high and low emotion, the roller coaster that you go through. And when you can let it all out, you let it all out. That's why, like, you know, they bought the hooch and they brought it in the fucking fuel cans, which is hilarious. But they like that, just that roller coaster, even if you let some out until you kind of mentally come to the point where you know you're done, that like there's never a full release of it. And that's definitely what that was, which
Right,
is,
yeah.
I think they pushed that pretty good, and it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it did. I mean, look, it did seem, you know, the scene makes sense in the way they portray it. It's obviously supposed to be figurative, because what I was keeping in mind when I watch it is that, you know, these are professional soldiers, right? So they do have to have a sense of like dispassionate objectivity in what they do. Like, they're going to kill people. That's their whole role. That's their mission. But it's supposed to be business as usual for them, right? And so to have this gigantic like orgy of gunfire at the end, like in the war country, right, is seemed a little, you know, it was obviously supposed to be figurative. And also, you know, my cultural sensitivity radar went off, because aren't they drinking alcohol, and and that's against the rules in this country. At least I know that was a thing 10 years later. You know, I'm sure there was plenty of opium. But
Yeah, that was, yeah.
But the alcohol was illegal, right?
Correct.
So yeah, so they were, you know, they that's the end of the war. It's over. It is crazy, man. It is crazy that it did actually happen like that and ended that fast. And
Until a short time later when it went back off.
right, yeah, forever, right, like literally forever. If you notice, by the way, like every now and then you'll get a story about, you know, in Iraq there was another terrorist, you know, there's some sort of like little sprinkle of chem war or terrorist war or return of ISIS, or, you know, which I don't know what that is. I guess it's like just a testing ground for whether Rand can, you know, have another thing go off there. But yeah, so it's over, and It also, by the way, it kind of mirrors the British action in the in 1983 in the y'all who did Britain invade the island off the coast of Argentina? Oh my God, why am I blanking on this? Who did they invade? Oh my God, who did they invade? Invasion 1983 British. Oh, the Falklands. I just came to me. The Falkland Islands, which most Americans haven't heard of actually, but was a major operation. The British still own the Falkland Islands, which is off the coast of South America. They have all this territory, and it's a rocky outcrop. But the Argentine Air Force or something took control of this island, and Margaret Thatcher, to flex her muscles, was like, we're going to fucking go in there and get these South Americans. And, it took just a very short time to reinvent, to have a counteroffensive against them. But it was a big propaganda boost. This was also in the middle of the trouble, the 30-year troubles in Northern Ireland. So, and she actually asked Reagan if he wanted to be involved in it. You want to go, you can go over there and get your nut too. Right, get some of these Crispies. But he was like, no, he didn't want to do that because Grenada happened after that, which is another one. It's like Grenada, right? This Caribbean island or whatever. The Marines invaded this island in like 1985, right? A volcanic island where they, some communists or whatever, so-called, like, took over the ambassador's residence. So we sent the full force of the United States military, right? Anyway, so that's over, and then they get back home, and there's a montage. Everybody goes to their jobs. The conspiracy guy who's in Tokyo Drift ends up as an oil man with a wig, and one of the guys is like stacking boxes at a Walmart. It's sad. Jake Gyllenhaal, of course, is in his room, smoking a cigarette at his desk, contemplating his novel that he's going to write. And then Fergus shows up at the door with a Vietnam, Nickelback wig on, unrecognizable, and says, I got some bad news. And we learn that, of course, Skarsgård, who's the tragic character in this, he's obviously, probably he's offed himself because he already had his separation papers before he had assaulted the colonel.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, what are your prospects? And he's like, I don't know, I'll sell dope or slang crack or something, which he may well have done, right, when he went back home.
Right.
And now he's dead, and we see him at the funeral home. We see him in his coffin, and this is where the movie has this dramatic shift in tone, because at times it's like joyful, at times it's a comedy, at times it's a dark comedy, at times it's a war adventure movie. And at the end of the movie, it really ends with this tragic note, and it's very sad, right? He says, every war is different. Every war is the same. And he walks away, and it ends. So I guess that's supposed to tell us, the audience, obviously, that especially in 2005, that you got another 15 years minimum, right? And that this is just going to keep going. So I don't think it's like a lesson. It's just a take on what war is and what it does. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's something that I thought about and kind of battled with bringing up, and I'm definitely going to bring it up now that we're kind of sitting here. That is a very, very, very real, very serious consequence, if you will. And I don't want to bring it down. I don't, I know this is for entertainment. And I know, I don't want to bring down the end of this, but
you're not bringing it down. Speak the truth. And this is helpful, and you're helping to get a deeper, picture of what this is about.
Suicide, especially veteran suicide, is an extremely, very, very real, very, very real threat. I personally had 2 of my battle buddies take their own life. And so the movie portrays the up and downs of war and training, and you see some of the fun stuff they do, some of the cool stuff they do to hang out, and then you also see the downside of it. You have one guy that kind of loses his mind, goes off on the colonel, that whole situation, and then he's the guy that ends up, I mean, I can only think of the same thing. So definitely a real thing. And I'm only bringing light to it because it's personal. It's a personal battle, not necessarily for me, but for a lot of people that I know. So I think that the movie did a good job of the ups and the downs, but then also towards the end, kind of showing some of the real, very real threats that are out there for guys that did do, some of that crazy shit. So is it a good ending to the movie? In my opinion, yes. Is it a happy ending? Obviously not. But there's definitely some realism to that one.
Well, I think that thank you for that, first of all. And I think that I don't know if this movie accomplished that or if it's just the actuality of real events, but there were a bunch of movies that came out about 10 years after this that dealt with this issue, right? There was an Ang Lee movie. There's a bunch of them. And one of the things that sort of strikes me when I watch those movies is it always seems to be it's like artificial, right? It's pushed too hard in terms of like the flawed nature of the characters and the war, and we know from it doesn't work when we know from the very beginning that it's going to be psychologically painful and sad, and that we're going to lose some of these characters like you would in real life. That it doesn't work when that happens. And one thing that this movie does well is we can't predict what's going to happen at the end in terms of the guys, and we certainly don't know that this is going to happen to this character. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, we don't even know this character at all, right? We see him like again in that first scene where we see him and Gyllenhaal. It's like he looks like the hard man. He looks like the guy who is going to set Gyllenhaal straight. But it turns out that the war and the military was the place that was doing that for him, and that now it's like they've been. I mean, look. One of the painful things is that this guy found his dedication, his duty, his purpose in this thing, and then it turns around and it says you're not welcome. Right? So that I think that that the movie ends. It's not supposed to end. It's not a happy ending. It's not
No.
the thing is not a happy ending, which is actually an amazing thing to consider, because even those movies like we were just talking about, like Lone Survivor and 12 Strong, and all these movies, they do have happy endings because the hero gets to walk away, right? But in this, it shows you, I guess, a more nuanced view of this whole thing, which is that number one, you don't know what's gonna happen to whom, and
Right.
that they're all just kind of cogs in this bigger thing.
That's kind of what I meant by like not necessarily a good ending, but a real ending. Every movie we watch, I mean, except for like the American Sniper, obviously it ended with him being shot by somebody who was trying to help, which is, of course, is tragic. But it does a great, like the way that the movie ending in something that happens, every day, 22 veterans a day. It ends it on something that is a very real struggle for a lot of people. And it came out in 2005, but now we see probably a more direct correlation between some of the things that happened and the way that it affected, people that, let's be real, were, regular Americans, a couple of months before they were over there. So
Right.
Definitely not a good ending, but a real ending for sure.
Well, I think one thing to take away from this film in terms of like the big picture is that, I don't know, as far as the sequence of events and the war machine, I think the poignant thing, first of all, is that the people who go off and serve like this they're just like they're people, right? I mean, this movie does a good job of showing us like who these guys are, like that they're people, and they have dignity and they're individuals, and they're men, right? And they're going to do this thing of serving their country, but unfortunately, there's this huge disconnect between those people and the people that use them again and again and again, right? Which is the system. And I think that one of the sad things is that people can watch this movie and see it as whatever they take from it, or see it as entertainment and walk away and completely forget, right? Completely forget any kind of impact or what it says to you, which is that, when the next thing happens, we're just going to repeat the whole thing, right? And everybody's going to, the war is going to happen, and the pyramid people are going to send off these guys to war, and they're going to reap the benefits and the rewards, and nothing will change. So, so anyway, anything else about this film? Any other final takeaways?
I don't think so. I think that we hit kind of all the major points. Everything that I kind of scribbled down while I was watching, I think that we jumped on pretty good. Yeah, I can't think of anything else, to be completely honest with you. Yeah,
I would say that there are many books and many movies that are in this sort of universe. One thing people have been saying in the chat throughout is they've been talking about the movie Brothers. Have you seen that film? Again, with Jake Gyllenhaal, Tobey Maguire, and I forget the lady in it. But Tobey Maguire is what is he in it? Is he a Marine, you guys, or is he a SEAL? He goes off to war. He gets captured and tortured, and then he comes back, and man, he does look like he has gone through some shit. And of course, Jake Gyllenhaal is like the civilian in that instance. But it's a powerful movie, but it's a pretty good one to go back and revisit.
Natalie Portman. I'll watch it just because she's in it.
What's the one where not Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, but it's sand and it's coarse, right? She's Amidala.
Oh yeah. Man, I am so not a movie guy, nor am I a book guy. Sorry if I'm getting some of these. My first, just to make, I guess, probably bring back some nostalgia. The first military movie I ever watched was Crimson Tide.
Yes.
Which I like, even to this day, I found it on Apple TV, so I bought it. The second military movie I ever watched was A Few Good Men.
Yes.
Just watched again the other day. Like, that movie will never get old, right? Like,
you want me on that wall.
Yeah.
You need me on that wall.
Yeah. And then Full Metal Jacket, I watched the first 20 minutes probably once a month. The rest of the movie, that definitely something that you could break down. But I don't know. I just don't. I have such a hard time like watching the rest of that movie. After the beginning, it's just boring as shit to me.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that movie is split into this like dualistic, half, right? It's the first half and then the combat second half, which is supposed to be. Remember when he's there and like the general comes up to him and he's like, "Why do you have a peace sign on your helmet?"
Yeah.
And it also says "Born to Kill." And he's like, "I don't know, man. I think it's something about the duality of man." The what?
Yeah. Like, it's a good movie, and you have to watch the whole thing at least once all the way through. But I don't know. I cannot get past just the first 20 minutes is all I want to see.
Yeah. Well, shouts out to my friend Maddie in the chat right there, because he and my other friend Luke, we talk about Kubrick all the time, and that movie is layered. Certainly, somebody earlier said Full Metal Jacket is better than Apocalypse Now. Well, of course I disagree. Apocalypse Now is the greatest movie of all time, but it's sort of apples and oranges. It's the same time frame. They're both war movies. One's Coppola, one's Kubrick, but they're not really comparable in any way. It's completely different takes on Vietnam in a strange. The tone, of both movies is like they have some similarity because it's about darkness and but they're totally different. And Apocalypse Now is the greatest movie ever made. You guys, right? Do you live near the river, the Ohio River, sir? I remember when I was young, my father would take me on the river, and he said that there was a gardenia plantation. Somebody said something to me the other day about Ohio River, and I gave them that speech, and they thought I was schizophrenic. But some other things just related to this before we shut it down. There's a book. I'm gonna grab it real quick. It's right here. There's a book called. Let's see. This is. Here's a couple of books. Random books I'm pulling out of the stack here. If anybody's interested. Just 3 random books that relate to this. One is this book called The Yellowbirds, which was written by this guy, Kevin Powers, who was a vet, and he was a combat vet. And they made a movie of this with Ty Sheridan a few years ago. This is a very good book, and he's from Richmond, so shouts out to him. Another is the book Delta Force by Charlie Beckwith. And if you like military stuff, if you're just like a dude who likes reading military stuff, this is a good book because he talks about the origins of Delta Force and how it was pretty much a big debacle with the Iranian hostages and all that stuff. And the Delta Force is actually the closest thing to British SAS that we have. And they train them, and SAS plays a major role in operations. It's like even in Desert Storm, they're great at long-range desert warfare. And another military book that is not related to this, but is about sort of foreign conflict, is this book by Mad Mike Hoare, who was the Seychelles Affair. And it was in the 70s when all of the groups were taking over, like the Belgian Congo and all these far-flung places. And they would basically, the powers that be got the mercenary groups to take them over. And actually, the Belgian, I think it was the Belgian Congo, was the one where the mercenary group made up of foreign legionnaires and ex-SAS took over the government. It was a large affair. The last thing I'll say is that I've got American Sniper in here somewhere.
It's a really good book. I guess there were like 2 versions. There was one that came out that Chris Kyle actually wrote himself. And then there was like one that was partly his that he wrote, part was somebody else.
Yeah, Ghost Rider.
But it like that book even breaks down what I was saying earlier about like the mental game. The Buds training. I never went through Buds. I never ever want to or plan to, because it just sounds fucking terrible. But it's literally the physical part. And I want to say it's either in that movie or in that book, but they mention your body only gives up when your mind does, or something to that effect. Our bodies are made, they're not made to push that far, but you can make them push that far. And Chris Kyle and the other people that were involved in the books, the movie, really did put they put a real big emphasis on that, and they did a really good job of portraying the mental game that goes with, kind of dealing with what he dealt with, and especially through training. I'm sure I hope everyone's seen the movie. If you're not, go watch it. It's epic. With the kid and the RPG, or the kid and the grenade, I couldn't imagine being in that position. And so I hate to just keep, harping on the mental health part of it, but it's definitely a real battle, things that, that a lot of us deal with. And for that guy to just do what he did as much as he did, that's absolutely crazy. But the book does a really good job of kind of breaking it down.
Yeah, that scene is I have a lot of problems with that whole thing. And that's a really disturbing and difficult scene. And it's weird that the movie begins with that, right?
I think they did that. I mean, they definitely did that on purpose. Like they wanted to bring that in right in the beginning, and then kind of throw it out a little bit later too.
I thought that, just of note, I love Bradley Cooper. Like, I love Bradley Cooper, but I thought he was miscast in that movie.
I 100% agree with you.
I thought, who should have played him was, when I saw Chris Pratt in Zero Dark 30, I thought that right there, that dude should play him. First of all, he looks exactly like him.
Right. Yep.
And he ended up basically playing him in all these other, like in the Amazon series that was released last year about the SEAL who, goes on they frame him and then he goes on the ramp. That's a good series on Amazon. I forget what it's called, but
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's got like the tomahawk and stuff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you know who else disagrees with you about that? And that would be, hi, I'm Governor Jesse Ventura, and I want to say that Chris Kyle is a liar. Wagyu beef. I was inducted into the Warlocks motorcycle gang. But no, it's people should definitely check out the movie. And another thing is that we also see the transition. My like sort of thesis at the beginning of this was that this movie represents this kind of midpoint that shows the transition between the pre-Big Nine almost innocence in terms of culture and people, and like people still, even in the military, even in this movie, they still have a light in their eyes, right? Versus post Big Nine, which is into this new phase of the war on terror. And that, of course, leads us into the war on the self and, the Great Reset, where we are now. Jake Gyllenhaal also was in that movie Rendition. You guys have probably forgotten that one. That one was about the Abu Ghraib and the facilities there. Oh, I just remembered a great movie about that, which, remember, back in the day was a huge deal, right? What was the lady's name, the girl's name? She was the guard. She had the dogs, and she was at Abu Ghraib. And she's posing. Well, there's a great movie about that. And it is with Oscar Isaac, and it's written by Paul Schrader. Hold on, let me look it up. It's got Willem Dafoe and
Exposure.
Something about gambling. The Card Counter. It's called The Card Counter. It kind of went by without anybody paying attention to it. Great movie, because Oscar Isaac is playing a former guy who worked at, obviously, Abu Ghraib, and you don't know that. You just know something is wrong, and he's a gambler. And then there's one scene where we see a flashback to that, and dude, it's dark, man. It's disturbing. And Willem Dafoe, of course, plays James. Is it Mitchell? He was the guy that did the Vice interview. And he lives in Virginia, and he was the architect of the enhanced interrogation program over there. He's a psychiatrist. And so Willem Dafoe, of course, plays him basically in the movie. And there's a kid who's like, going out for justice. Great movie, though. Paul Schrader. You guys should check it out. There's so many good ones about all this stuff. Maybe one day they won't have to make movies about this, right? Because there'll be no more war, and fall is coming, you guys, and we can have our pumpkin spice latte. Ooh. But I know, like, look, all this stuff always happens over there, right?
Right.
That's why the movie is like grainy and sandy, and it's got this kind of sepia vision where the soldiers, like, they're here, and then the Marines in this, they go over there. So all this stuff takes place over there. But not everybody in the world, everybody else in the world gets it taken to them, I guess. Right. So
I mean, I'd rather it be over there than here.
Oh yeah, well, no, yeah, of course. But what I'm saying is that Big Nine obviously brought that home. But who knows what's going to happen, right? But anyway, man, I want to thank you, everybody. Say thanks to Grunt here, Grunt Smash, who is a frequent guest and a friend of the Boiler Room. He's a friend of Hesher's, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to go in there on Thursday nights and talk with them, with Hesher and Spore and Ruckus, and with Grunt here about all kinds of stuff that's happening now. So please check out the latest episode of Boiler Room from last Thursday, which is in the video description. Also, you can check out Grunt here, who's also a guest on Joseph Arthur. He's over on TNT Radio, State of the Nation, a bunch of different shows. So check out his takes over there. Anything else you want to say? Anybody want to give a shout out to?
No, I mean, this is my first time kind of streaming just you and me based. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Good time, good talks. The chat is hilarious. I'm having a great time with y'all. One thing I do want to throw out there, if you guys want to, I mentioned it in the chat, but I'll just put it out there for everybody else. If they're not in there, just listening or just watching, check out Restrepo. That's another good kind of like more recent time frame type stuff. Was definitely a good one. Kind of. I literally watched them back to back. Like watched Jarhead and then I watched Restrepo because I wanted to kind of see the major differences in I'll call it my war, the war now and the war then. But Restrepo's a good one. But other than that, no man, that's it. I appreciate you guys having me, and anytime you want to jump into something else, let me know, dude. We'll tear it up.
That is a great recommendation. Totally forgot about that. I've seen that documentary. It is great. It's really, really fantastic. So thanks for putting that out there. And yeah, man, I mean, really appreciate you coming on here. I know this is, we were doing a movie analysis about, drama and acting. And of course, I wanted your take because, you are the genuine expert in this area. And so I know that people really appreciate your words and your experience. And so I really want to say thank you. I really appreciate it, taking the time to do this for us.
Oh, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Listen, everybody out there. Hold on. Let me see if I got any super chats real quick. Thank you, everybody, for coming here, stopping by. I know there was a lot of activity tonight. I know JD was on I think he was on Discord earlier. And then, of course, DPH, our homeboy, Church of the Eternal Logos, was doing his stream earlier. Also, you can catch me tomorrow night here again because I will be here with our good friend Chase Haggard. And we will be doing an analysis of, what are we doing? 21st Century Doomed Love and Coomer Pods with Lost in Translation and Her with Joaquin Phoenix. And I think I've been looking forward to this one for a long time because those are both interesting movies. And shouts out to Jason out there who sends $10 via PayPal. Thank you so much for your support, Jason. Really appreciate you. Let me check and see if I got any super chats. Let me look in the I don't think there's anything in the dono chat. And I had a couple super chats come in this week. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Shouts out to Johnny out there who sends $5 and says, "Yup." Yo, cheers, Johnny. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for that $5 donation on dono chat. Also, let's look at the super chats. Yo, here we go. I don't think I got to DJ last time. Our friend Day Jarhead, who sent $8 Australian and sent Love Ronan. That was for Ronan. Shouts out to Pure Blood Anglo Christian who sends $5. No comment. Thank you so much, man, for your support. Really, really appreciate you. Thank you. Also, shouts out to my friend Maddie out there who made me this t-shirt. Thank you so much, Maddie. Really love you. Appreciate you. And I think that's about it, you guys. Again, please catch me here tomorrow night. Catch me outside then. We're going to be doing Her. And speaking of Catch Me Outside, have you heard like the successor to that, which was period.
I didn't. I'm not going to lie. I didn't even watch the movie Hers with Joaquin Phoenix, and it's like the AI girlfriend or whatever.
Yes.
Dude, I cannot, like, as much as we've talked about AI, I don't know if you brought it up here, but in Boiler Room, TNT, The Great Reset, like all of that fucking nonsense. Like, I cannot get behind watching this movie. Like, part of me wants to, because Joaquin Phoenix is like, I think he's awesome. Yeah. At least as an actor. I don't know if I can do it.
Well, honestly, I can I can see you not watching this movie. Okay. And I mean, cool. The movie came out in 2013 and I actually avoided it for 10 years. It's same thought, I just, I didn't want to like deal with this, and I watched it and it's a disturbing movie because of, he's in a relationship with an operating system, but it's normalized because the world is totally gone. Dude.
Technological, yeah.
Yeah, it's just gone, man. And it is supposed to be kind of a near future world, but of course, when it was made, I mean, now it's just reality. When the movie was made, for instance, it was weird.
Yeah, it was still just like a thought, like oh shit, could this happen?
Yes. And the scenes, most of the scenes in the movie outside are with people like walking around talking to themselves because they have earbuds in. And at the time, like that wasn't a thing. This is 2013. And now that's the world. That's ubiquitous. If you were in an elevator or a lift and somebody was, standing there talking to themselves, you'd be like, oh yeah, they're talking to their mother 24/7 because they're a Amazon employee or whatever, instead of like, oh, this is clearly like a schizophrenic methed out, lunatic, which is like what sort of the population has become. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because the flip side to that is, of course, Lost in Translation, which is 2000. That's 2003, I think.
I like that movie.
It's great movie. Great movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's sort of the opposite of that. And it's interesting because that was made by Sofia Coppola and the other one's made by Spike Jonze. And were they married? Well, certainly the Giovanni Ribisi character in Lost in Translation is like clearly based on Spike Jonze. So she made this movie about them. And then later he made a movie about the same thing, but the opposite way, which is very, very weird. But that one is about human connection, so we'll see where Chase wants to take this tomorrow night. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all. And please, you can support me anytime. Please be there for Boiler Room this week. TNT Radio, please keep supporting all of our friends. What day is this? Dude, it's Tuesday. I was thinking it was
today's
Friday.
Tuesday. No, it's Tuesday. Yeah, so we got 2 days till Boiler Room. You actually, hey, your days are all fucked.
Dude, I was thinking this whole time it was Friday, man.
No, it's Tuesday. You did mention to me doing this on Friday, so I don't know how you got all that mixed up.
Yeah. What is this, a weekday? Yeah.
But definitely jump on Boiler Room. That's just a good fun. It's on Rockfin. It's on Spreaker. No, I don't know where to get all that. I just know Rockfin. You can go to ACR's website. But
it's free.
Yeah, it's free. Bazed and I think a couple of times we have, and I don't think it's been you. I think it's been me, but I've kind of contradicted you or I guess maybe argued with you or kind of like jumped onto him like, hey, whoa, hold up. That's not, so we actually kind of work against each other, but that's, I think one of the positive sides to Boiler Room is, we all kind of come from different areas, different mental ideas, different, even some different political views on certain things. So it's a good long, 3-hour conversation of a bunch of us kind of not arguing, but debating things that are actually relevant to life, not necessarily what CNN and NBC are telling you. So definitely jump over there. We have a hell of a good time. It's probably going to be, it might be my last Boiler Room for a little while, at least for a couple of weeks until I kind of get some other stuff straightened out. But I have a feeling this week's going to be pretty epic. So
yeah, we certainly are capable of holding differing logical opinions without
there you go. Yeah, logical opinions. I'm taking that.
Yeah, without getting too tied up in it, I guess. You listen, we're basically the same, man. You went through military training. I went through drama school training. I'm a trained actor.
That's pretty good. I'll let you have that, Stab. Just remember, the only thing worse than you is being in the Navy. Speaking of Navy, what does Kiefer say in A Few Good Men? I love you, Navy boys. Anytime I want to go anywhere, you're always there to give me a ride.
Yeah, he says we have beliefs that we hold dear, things like code, honor. Right?
Yeah,
that's a great movie, dude.
Yeah, I'll have to go watch it again tomorrow.
You got to watch the comedian Nick Mullins' take on A Few Good Men, because his take is that Jack Nicholson didn't know what movie he was getting into, and he didn't know his lines, and he was like, I thought we were going to have my good friend Dennis Hopper show up here. I can't tell the difference between real life and the movies, man. that movie is so good. It's like it's infinitely watchable.
Yeah,
It's a great movie. And also, by the way, you mentioned Crimson Tide, and I did a
I
stream.
love that movie. Love that movie.
Yeah, I did a stream on Don Simpson, and Crimson Tide was part of that.
Cool.
His book High Concept, and it went into that movie. You know, Lip is on her horses, right? Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
And Don Simpson's like idea for that movie was basically like Top Gun was successful. Days of Thunder, you know, we tried to make it like F-16s, but going around a track. Let's make it Top Gun, but they're in submarines, and the men are very sweaty. And one's like the father figure. They're arguing with each other, and there's nukes. Who's going to come out on top? And that was one of Gene Hackman's like final great performances.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Tony Scott. So, all right.
Yeah, I got to get the heck out of here.
Yep, let's go. All right, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate y'all. And we're going to peace out. All right. And see ya.
Deuces.